Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Greg Mulvihill. Greg Mulvihill and Diana met on a dating website in 2005. Both living far from their families, they decided to move to San Diego together. Diana had been passionate about fitness since she was young, playing sports in high school and eventually becoming a triathlete as an adult. Their love of the outdoors and fitness brought them closer together. 2000s, Diana and Greg both were highly skilled professionals and achieved great success in their careers. Diana was considered extremely trustworthy by her peers. Diana and Greg first met in 2005, and 2 years later, they decided to get married, marking the beginning of their new life together. They chose Costa Rica for their honeymoon, where they had the opportunity to learn to surf. In the early days of their marriage, they made the most of their time together, experiencing many exciting adventures together. After their wedding, Diana and Greg moved to Carlsbad, a suburb north of San Diego. The area has a mix of lagoons, hiking trails, hills, and secluded spots. Diana was immediately drawn to the area. She enjoyed the quiet atmosphere and the beautiful scenery around her. 3 years after their wedding, Diana was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, a chronic condition that affects millions of people worldwide. Fibromyalgia is characterized by pain and tenderness throughout the body. While the exact cause of fibromyalgia is unknown, there are a number of factors that may contribute to the condition. To help her cope with her fibromyalgia, Greg took her on a relaxing vacation to Santa Cruz, California in 2011. Greg was a caring husband who understood the impact fibromyalgia had on Diana's life. The condition caused constant muscle pain, fatigue, and limited her energy, making it difficult for her to maintain a job. Diana's ongoing health struggles eventually led her to give up her career. With more time at home, she longed to become a mother. Diana and Greg tried for years to have children, but Diana suffered multiple miscarriages. The loss of these pregnancies affected Diana, both physically and emotionally. Although Diana did not have children, she had 2 cats, Lanny and Turtle, whom she loved dearly. One day, Turtle became ill and passed away. To help Diana through this, Greg adopted a kitten for her, whom she named Taffy. Greg's gift helped Diana greatly. After years of trying to conceive without success, Diana was shocked to discover that she was pregnant. Greg was overjoyed and eager to become a father. Diana shared the same sentiment, feeling that her dream of becoming a mother was slowly coming true. In September 2012, Diana gave birth to a baby boy. After the baby was born, Greg took time off work to care for his newborn son. He was very happy and cherished every moment with his son. Diana, on the other hand, was worried about her son's health, wanting him to be happy and healthy. Over time, Diana began to suspect that her son might have a condition similar to her fibromyalgia. However, Greg believed that their son was healthy. Despite their differing opinions, Diana remained convinced that their son had the disease. Diana began extensive research and discovered guaifenesin, a drug commonly used to treat chest infections. Some believe that guaifenesin can help relieve the symptoms of fibromyalgia, leading Diana to consider giving her son a high dose of the drug. However, Greg was against giving his son the drug. The disagreements between Diana and Greg over how to care for their son added to the tension and pressure in their marriage. When Greg injured his shoulder and lost his job, tensions escalated. With her income reduced, Diana sought a sales position to supplement the family income. She also tried to generate income through online cooking videos, with Greg helping behind the camera, but the project failed. Diana then made promotional videos featuring cat litter, but these also failed to bring in the desired financial returns. When their son turned 2, the constant arguments and disagreements between Diana and Greg over their son's health issues continued to cause tension. They found themselves unable to find common ground. Diana confided in a coworker about her feelings of frustration and lack of support from Greg, revealing a deep rift between them. In July 2014, police questioned Greg about Diana's allegations of abuse. According to police, Diana filed several police reports regarding Greg's actions. As a result of these accusations, Greg was evicted from the home, while Diana and their son were allowed to stay. Diana confided in a friend about Greg's abuse, saying that the incident occurred while she was sleeping. According to Diana, her medication made her drowsy, and when she woke up, she found Greg touching her without her consent. Additionally, Diana accused Greg of sexually abusing their son. These allegations led to the involvement of Child Protective Services. Greg denied the allegations, believing that Diana fabricated the complaints because he disagreed with her about their son's health status. In response, Greg filed for divorce and sought custody of their son. The police searched for evidence to support claims of abuse against Greg and his son. Ultimately, a judge ordered both Greg and the boy to undergo psychiatric evaluations. After an investigation, the evaluations found no evidence of child abuse by Greg. Additionally, the police found no evidence that Greg had assaulted Diana. As a result, the charges against Greg were dropped and he was given custody of their son, a decision that upset Diana. In a subsequent settlement, Diana agreed to live in their home and compensate Greg for his share of the property. On September 1, 2016, the Carlsbad Police Department received a call from Jason Kovac, a close friend of Greg's. Jason reported that Greg had been shot multiple times and was losing a lot of blood. At the time Jason called 911, a Carlsbad police patrol officer was nearby. When they arrived, the officer found Jason and Greg on the side of the road. Jason explained to the officer that the shooting had occurred about a half-mile away from their current location. The officer quickly realized that waiting for an ambulance would put Greg's life in greater danger. In order to get Greg to the emergency room as soon as possible, the officer placed Greg in the back of his car and took him to the hospital. Meanwhile, just minutes later the officer had surrounded the area and began searching for the shooter. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to locate the shooter. At the hospital, doctors immediately rushed Greg into emergency surgery, where they discovered he had a gunshot wound to the chest. Greg survived the surgery, however. He was placed on life support and was expected to regain consciousness on his own. The police spoke to Jason about the incident. Jason, willing to share what he knew, explained that Greg had called the night of the incident. He told Jason that he had received a call from a private investigator who said to have important information for his upcoming divorce and custody battle with Diana. The anonymous inspector provided a specific time and place to meet. Initially unsure about the phone call, Greg's curiosity eventually won out. Greg then asked Jason to come to the agreed location with him. Concerned for Greg's safety, Jason agreed, and they prepared by bringing flashlights and baseball bats for protection. Greg and Jason arrived at the remote location indicated by the mysterious caller, but the darkness made it difficult to see. There were no street lights, making it extremely dark. The caller informed Greg that the package containing the documents would be attached to a large utility pole. Upon discovering the package, Greg approached the pole while holding a flashlight, slowly scanning the surrounding area with the light. Jason noticed that Greg's flashlight suddenly focused on something in the bushes. Greg immediately yelled, "Gun!" A gunshot rang out, causing Greg and Jason to quickly flee the scene. Bullets whizzed past their heads as they ran toward their car. When they reached the car, Jason realized that Greg had been shot. Jason quickly called 911, but was unable to provide a detailed description of the shooter to the police. However, he was able to lead them to the exact location of the shooting. During the investigation, police searched the area where the shooting occurred and focused on a utility pole, as the caller had told Greg to retrieve a package from that location. Near the pool, police discovered a neatly folded towel. Police found this suspicious and wondered if someone had intentionally left the towel behind to trick Greg into thinking it was a package he was supposed to retrieve. According to Jason's testimony, he reported hearing up to 6 gunshots at the scene, but police were unable to find any shell casings or weapons. The lack of forensic evidence led investigators to believe that the shooter may have had extensive experience and knowledge of weapons, allowing them to avoid leaving any evidence of the crime. As police searched the area where Greg was shot, they noticed a distinct smell of feces in the air. Further investigation revealed a pile of feces along with a towel nearby, which appeared to have been used to clean up after someone had defecated. Both the stool and towel samples were preserved and sent to the crime lab for forensic analysis in an attempt to find clues or potential evidence related to the shooting. However, the process of collecting DNA evidence is time-consuming, and it took up to a month to develop a DNA profile from the stool and towel samples. While waiting for the DNA results, the police continued their efforts to find the shooter. They examined all available evidence, followed up on potential leads, and thoroughly investigated several individuals. The police focused on Greg's estranged wife, Diana. The police asked Diana to come to the police station for questioning. They wanted to know if she knew of a private investigator who had worked with her husband, Greg, on matters related to their divorce. Diana claimed that she knew nothing about the detective and said that she no longer spoke to Greg. She also gave an alibi, saying she was home with her son at the time of the shooting. When questioned further, Diana said she could not think of anything else to add and could not identify anyone who might have been involved in the crime. Greg regained consciousness and began his recovery. As his health improved, the police interviewed him about the incident. They asked about his wife Diana and her possible involvement in the shooting. Greg admitted that he and Diana had a troubled history and were in the midst of a tense divorce and custody battle over their son. He suspected that Diana might have been involved in the shooting. Greg also said he had no enemies and did not know who might be behind the shooting. Early in the investigation, the police investigated the phone number that had called Greg. The number was on a pay-as-you-go plan, indicating that it did not belong to anyone. However, the police were successful in obtaining information from the cell phone carrier, which led them to a Best Buy near Carlsbad where the phone was purchased. The police immediately contacted the store manager to request information about the purchase, including the date of the transaction. They also requested any available video footage of the person who purchased the phone. After reviewing hours of video footage, the manager identified relevant footage that corresponded to the time of purchase of the phone. The footage was sent to the police for review. Although the video was grainy, the police were able to identify Diana, Greg's wife, in the footage. This new information made Diana the prime suspect in Greg's shooting. Diana was arrested, and during her arrest, Diana repeatedly maintained her innocence. The police then questioned Diana about her purchases at Best Buy. They discovered that she had purchased a cell phone, which then called Greg, leading to his shooting. However, Diana initially told the police that she had purchased a router. Faced with a surveillance camera image of the person who purchased the cell phone, who looked exactly like her, Diana admitted the truth. Following this revelation, Diana changed her story about her involvement in Greg's shooting. She said that her fear of Greg prompted her to buy a gun, which led her to practice at a local shooting range called Iron Sights. At Iron Sights, Diana claimed she met an instructor named Weldon McDavid, who taught her how to shoot. Weldon was a former Marine with expertise in firearms. Diana reportedly told Weldon about her difficult divorce and custody battle with Greg, which led to a close friendship between Diana and Weldon that eventually turned into love. Diana told police that she and Weldon had devised a plan. To carry out the plan, Weldon told Diana to buy a phone and use it to lure Greg to a remote location. Weldon's job was to intimidate Greg without using force. Diana admitted to driving Weldon to the location and picking him up. However, when she heard police sirens approaching in the distance, she asked about the situation. Weldon later revealed to her that he had shot Greg in self-defense because Greg had been aggressive toward him. She denied any involvement in the shooting and insisted that she had never asked Weldon to commit any acts of violence against her husband Greg. Diana was charged with attempted murder after admitting her role in the incident involving Greg. Fortunately, Greg quickly recovered from the gunshot wound to the chest and was released from hospital shortly afterwards. The police tracked down Weldon and brought him in for questioning. When the police asked about his relationship with Diana and his whereabouts on the night of the shooting, Weldon claimed he was at home, about 30 minutes from Carlsbad. The police then asked Weldon for a DNA sample, which made him visibly nervous as he realized they were getting closer to the truth. When asked if his DNA might have been present at the crime scene, Weldon feigned surprise and suddenly remembered something, saying it was a recent memory. Weldon told police that the night before the shooting, he had gone jogging due to stomach problems after eating Mexican food for dinner. He claimed to have stopped on a dirt road to use the restroom. Based on this information, police obtained a search warrant for Weldon's home. Their search turned up a rifle with a live bullet and 6 fired casings in the rafters. The 6 casings confirmed Jason Cack's account of hearing 6 gunshots. As a result, Weldon was arrested and charged with attempted murder and attempted murder. Police searched Diana's home with a warrant and examined her computer. They discovered a search history for the phrase "new moon." Notably, the night Greg was shot, September 1st, coincided with a new moon, when the surrounding light was very dim. By carefully analyzing Diana's search history, police were able to conclude that she had prior knowledge of the shooting. Her interest in the new moon suggested that she intended to take advantage of the lack of ambient light to facilitate the murder of her husband. Further investigation revealed Diana's motive for killing Greg. As part of the divorce settlement, Diana was required to pay Greg $120,000 for their home. Faced with the possibility of not being able to make payments on time, Diana may have seen getting rid of Greg as a way to avoid paying the money. In October 2017, the trial of Diana Lovejoy and Weldon McDavid began. The jury returned a guilty verdict, convicting Diana and Weldon of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Upon hearing the verdict, Diana collapsed to the ground. Weldon was sentenced to 50 years in prison, while Diana received a sentence of 26 years in prison. Both defendants maintained their innocence despite the guilty verdict. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Emmett Corrigan. Ashley Harmon, a bright and energetic person, became a caretaker for her 5 siblings after her parents' divorce at age 9. Her strong faith as a devout Mormon gave her strength and comfort in tough times, helping her overcome obstacles with determination and courage. In 2003, Ashley, a human development major, met Emmett Corrigan, a philosophy student, while attending Utah State. Like Ashley, Emmett's parents divorced when he was 10, and he had a tough time coping with the aftermath. However, he eventually found comfort in the Mormon faith. Although Emmett wasn't born into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he converted to the church at 17 in a ceremony attended by his family and friends. Ashley initially thought Emmett was cute, and he felt the same way about her. Emmett was impressed by Ashley's intelligence and was immediately smitten with her from the moment they met. In fact, he confided in his closest friends that he knew Ashley was the one he wanted to marry. Emmett proposed to Ashley at Christmas 2008, and she happily accepted. They married in a Mormon temple, surrounded by shared beliefs. Overjoyed, they started their new life, finding stability and happiness in their union. In Mormonism, marriage is sacred and eternal, lasting beyond death, with divorce only allowed in extreme cases. Ashley and Emmett welcomed twin daughters in 2005, feeling overjoyed and thrilled to experience parenthood. While attending Utah State University, they balanced childcare and education, relying on faith and love to overcome challenges. Emmett graduated from Utah State University with honors in 2009, attended law school and passed the bar, becoming a bankruptcy attorney. Meanwhile, Ashley stayed home to care for their 4 kids, managing the household while Emmett built his career. Behind closed doors, their seemingly perfect life hid secrets. In August 2010, Emmett faced increasing pressure to provide for his family of 4 young children, all under the age of 5, as the financial burden became overwhelming. To improve his financial situation, Emmett decided to establish his own criminal defense law firm. A friend introduced him to Candy Hall, a reputable paralegal with prior experience working for a criminal attorney. Following a successful lunch meeting, Emmett hired Candy as an assistant for his criminal defense firm. Candy Hall's husband was not in the story. It was Robert Hall, the Emmett, who was a great dad and worker. When his wife, Ashley, got a job, he was thrilled. But as his business and family responsibilities grew, Ashley noticed a strain on their marriage. Robert coped with the pressure by working out excessively, often at inconvenient times, leaving Ashley to care for their 4 kids alone. On January 15, 2011, Ashley and Emmett had their 5th child, a son, despite their growing distance. However, Emmett's behavior towards their newborn was different from how he had behaved with their other children. Instead of being attentive, he started spending more and more time away, sometimes staying out overnight. Ashley confided in her sister that she was worried about Emmett's actions and suspected he might be cheating on her. Around the same time, Emmett's assistant, Candy Hall, was experiencing her own marital problems. She told a friend that her husband, Rob, was jealous of her working for the charismatic Emmett, and their constant fights were affecting their marriage. On their 7th wedding anniversary, March 6, 2011, Ashley was left alone with the children while Emmett claimed he was attending a bodybuilding convention. Ashley felt panicked and concerned about her marriage, wondering if she was doing something wrong that made Emmett unhappy. Although she was unhappy, Ashley was determined to work through their problems and make their marriage better, as divorce was not an option for her. Ashley decided to tackle the issue head-on. She planned a perfect evening to mend her relationship with Emmett, cooking his favorite meal and ensuring the kids were on their best behavior. But when he arrived 2 hours late, he turned away from her kiss. Undeterred, Ashley remained steadfast in her goal to rekindle their love, believing it was worth trying to. 2 hours after Ashley finished preparing dinner, the Corrigan family gathered around the table to eat. However, Emmett claimed he wasn't hungry, despite Ashley's obvious effort and attention to detail. It was clear she had invested a lot of time, thought, and love into the meal, but Emmett's lack of interest left Ashley feeling disappointed and hurt. As the rest of the family enjoyed their meal, Emmett suddenly got up, saying he needed to go to Walgreens. He promised to be right back, seeming not to notice Ashley's growing concern. Ashley suspected there was more to Emmett's actions and begged him to stay and connect with her, reminding him of their family's importance. However, Emmett responded harshly, telling Ashley not to dictate what he did. He then left the house, leaving Ashley feeling confused and hurt. On the same day, another issue was emerging in Emmett's life. His assistant Candy and her husband Rob Hall were at a crisis point in their marriage. Despite their love for each other, Rob was packing his belongings, deciding to leave their home, believing it was best to distance himself and start fresh. That evening, Rob phoned his daughter to ask if she was out driving Candy's car. She told him she wasn't. A few minutes later, his daughter drove past Walgreens and spotted Candy's car in the parking lot, but thought little of it. She immediately called her father to report her discovery. Rob's initial reaction was a casual, "Oh, okay." Little did they realize that this ordinary phone call was about to drastically change the course of 2 families' lives forever. Meanwhile, Ashley lay in bed, her heart heavy with worry, praying fervently for her marriage to succeed. She had been texting and calling Emmett desperately, trying to reach him, but he wasn't responding. Her intuition told her something was wrong, and she couldn't shake off a sense of unease. Around 1 p.m., a 911 call reported gunshots and a screaming woman in the Walgreens parking lot, prompting a rapid police response. As they arrived at the scene, officers were uncertain about what they would find. Had there been a random drive-by shooting, a botched drug deal, a robbery, or something entirely different? Without knowing what to expect, they approached the area with caution. When the first officer stepped out of the patrol car, he was met with a horrific scene. A lifeless body lay on the ground, and a second person, wounded and in agony, was clutching their head. The injured person was rushed to the hospital with a gunshot wound, leaving the police with more questions than answers. Amidst the chaos, one key witness caught the police's attention. Her name was Candy Hall, and she was present at the crime scene. At the hospital, Candy identified the injured man as her husband, Rob, and the deceased man as her boss, Emmett. The autopsy revealed that Emmett had been shot twice, once in the head and once in the chest. Shortly after Emmett's lifeless body was discovered in the Walgreens parking lot, his wife Ashley received a knock on her front door. When she answered, she was greeted by police officers who broke the devastating news. Her husband, Emmett, had been shot and killed. Ashley was left stunned, inconsolable, and bewildered, struggling to comprehend what could have led to this tragic event. After the police informed Ashley that her husband had been killed, a detective asked her about Rob and Candy Hall. Ashley knew Candy as Emmett's assistant, but she suspected that Candy and Emmett were having an affair. The police took Candy in for questioning from the Walgreens parking lot, trying to piece together what led to Emmett's murder and Rob being shot in the head. When detectives asked Candy if she had a romantic relationship with her boss Emmett, she denied it. They also asked if they had ever had sex, and Candy strongly denied that too. Candy told the detectives that she had gone to Walgreens that night to pick up a prescription. She claimed to have run into Emmett by chance in the store, and they decided to go for a drive in his car. As they drove to a gas station, Candy's phone rang. It was her estranged husband, Rob. Candy told Rob that she was out with Emmett, but the conversation turned sour when Rob became jealous and threatened to hurt Emmett. At long last, Candy and Emmett pulled up to Walgreens. As they got out of the car, Candy's heart sank when she saw Rob standing at the entrance, his face red with anger. The air was electric with tension as a fierce argument broke out between Rob and Emmett, which quickly escalated into a physical fight. Just as suddenly, 3 loud gunshots rang out. Candy spun around to see both men lying on the ground. She quickly spotted the gun lying nearby, picked it up, and flung it away from herself. Candy couldn't identify who fired the first shot. Rob was shot in the head, stitched up, and questioned by detectives. They found his gun at the scene and asked who it belonged to. Rob said it was his, explaining Emmett, and he fought in a parking lot. The gun fell, they struggled, Emmett shot Rob, and Rob couldn't recall who fired the fatal shot due to his wound. Detectives wondered if Emmett might have fired first, since he ended up dead. Since the shooting took place in the Walgreens parking lot, the detectives turned to the security footage for answers. Upon reviewing the footage, they noticed Rob Hall arriving in the parking lot at 9:55 p.m. 1 minute later, Rob was seen entering the Walgreens store, seemingly searching for someone as he rushed through each aisle. The security footage captured Rob exiting the Walgreens at 10:06 p.m. and parking his car beside Candy's vehicle. He then waited there for the next few minutes. Approximately 10 minutes later, Emmett's truck appeared on the footage as it pulled into the parking lot. However, the shooting itself was not caught on camera. Candy initially denied being romantically involved with her boss, but rumors among their co-workers suggested otherwise. According to their co-workers, Candy and Rob were seen frequently spending time together in his office with the door closed, just 3 weeks after she was hired. On the day Emmett was shot, detectives made a curious discovery. Emmett had accompanied Candy to the public defender's office to discuss divorcing Rob. During the investigation into Emmett Corrigan's murder, crime scene investigators searched his vehicle in the parking lot and found steroids in the glove compartment. This discovery wasn't a surprise to many of Emmett's loved ones, as he had been heavily focused on bodybuilding and his behavior had changed, leading some to suspect he was using steroids. When Candy gave her statement to the detectives, she described a specific pattern of shots that suggested Rob shot and killed Emmett twice before turning the gun on himself and shooting himself in the head. This evidence was enough for the detectives to obtain an arrest warrant for Rob Hall, charging him with first-degree murder. As a result, Rob Hall was arrested and charged with Emmett Corrigan's murder. Rob Hall faced severe consequences for his actions. A conviction for first-degree murder would have resulted in either life imprisonment without parole or the death penalty. When Rob Hall went on trial for the murder of Emmett Ashley, Emmett's widow hoped the trial would bring her some closure and help her grieve. She believed that understanding her husband's affair and death would provide her with a sense of closure. According to the prosecution, Rob was enraged by Emmett's affair with his wife Candy and blamed him for ruining his marriage. They claimed that Rob shot Emmett and then attempted to take his own life. However, Rob's defense team presented a different account. They argued that Emmett was the aggressor on the night of his death and had a history of abusing steroids. The defense alleged that during the altercation, Emmett grabbed Rob's gun, shot Rob, and then Rob regained control of the weapon and killed Emmett in self-defense. Candy Hall, the wife of Rob Hall, was a key witness in his trial. Her testimony during the trial differed slightly from the account she provided to the police on the night of Emmett's death. On the witness stand, Candy claimed to have heard a distinct sequence of shots, stating that there was an initial pop, followed by two more quick pops. This revised account supported the defense's argument, which suggested that Emmett had shot Rob Hall first, before Rob managed to regain control of the gun and shoot Emmett twice, resulting in his death. Prosecutors needed to prove Rob, not Emmett, was the Walgreens shooter. They presented forensic evidence that the murder weapon leaves significant gunshot residue, GSR, after firing. Tests showed Rob had 32 GSR particles on his left palm and 23 on his right, while Emmett had 1 on his left hand and none on his right, proving Rob fired the gun. After careful consideration, the jury found Rob Hall not guilty of first-degree murder. However, they did reach a unanimous decision that he was guilty of second-degree murder, meaning the murder was not premeditated. The judge presiding over the case sentenced Rob to 30 years in prison, and he will be eligible for parole in 2028 when he is 58 years old. Despite being convicted, Rob has consistently claimed innocence and appealed his conviction in 2021. However, the Idaho Supreme Court upheld his conviction, denying him a retrial. 2 months after Emmett's murder, Candy Hall was arrested and charged with embezzlement for allegedly stealing from her previous employer, an attorney. These embezzlement charges were unrelated to Emmett's murder. Instead of facing the original embezzlement allegations, Candy pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of grand theft and received a prison sentence. She was released on parole in 2014, but remains on probation until 2026. Candy Hall spoke candidly on Dateline, overcome with guilt about the incident's harm to her relationships with her kids. She's unsure how to move forward, hoping to prove to them it was a regrettable mistake. Ashley's life was shattered when her husband Emmett was murdered by his lover's husband. She bravely confronted Emmett's lover on Dr. Phil in 2015. Refusing to be defined by grief, Ashley rebuilt her life by leaving the past behind and starting anew. She moved to a new town, and her 5 kids slowly rediscovered happiness. Ashley found love again, remarried, and had 2 more kids. Now she uses her blog to support others who've endured trauma. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Banaz Mahmoud. Banaz Mahmoud was born on December 16, 1985 in Iraq. She comes from an Iraqi Kurdish family with strong religious traditions. Her parents, Mahmoud Babakar Mahmoud and his wife, had 6 children, 1 son, Baman, and 5 daughters, Baza, Beel, Han, Jaban, and Banaz. They lived in a rural tribal area in Iraqi Kurdistan, adhering to traditional values, especially regarding women's roles. In 1995, when Banaz was 10 years old, her family moved to the UK. However, this change in location did not alter their deeply held religious and traditional views. Despite being in a more liberal European country, the family continued to reject modern opinion and lived within their tight-knit religious community. At 17, Banaz was forced into a marriage with a man 10 years her senior, who had recently arrived from Iraq. He did not speak English and lacked basic literacy skills. Banaz having met her future husband only 3 times before the wedding. Banaz, described as a girl with brown eyes, long dark hair, and a kind smile, followed tradition and moved into her new husband's home, despite him being a stranger to her. From the start, Banaz suffered physical and emotional abuse at the hands of her husband. Despite having lived in the UK and being aware of her rights, she was trapped in a cycle of violence. She tried to leave her husband multiple times, but her family forced her to return, as it was considered a disgrace for the entire Mahmoud family. With no support from her relatives, Banaz turned to the police twice, but they failed to take action, leaving her vulnerable to further abuse. In July 2005, after 2 years of marriage, Banaz finally escaped her husband's house and returned to her parents' home. After leaving her husband, Banaz felt a sense of freedom. She met Ramith Soleimani, and they fell deeply in love. However, they had to keep their relationship a secret. They would only communicate twice a day, exchanging messages in the morning and evening. Ramith was unlike the men surrounding Banaz, as he was calm, wise, and courteous. He treated she with great respect and kindness, instantly winning her heart. Before long, they began envisioning a future together, discussing wedding plans and a happy family life. They even chose names for their potential children. These joyful dreams brought Banaz happiness and gave her the strength to cope with the hatred and aggression from her family. In early October 2005, Banaz was walking down the street when she noticed a car following her. She recognized the people inside as Kurdish migrants sent by her father. Knowing her family's history, Banaz became terrified for her safety. On October 10, 2005, Banaz visited the police station again. During a 2-hour conversation, she shared detailed information about her life with her husband, including the physical abuse she suffered, her family's resentment, and the recent surveillance. She told the police that her husband had repeatedly beaten her, and during one incident, he nearly knocked out her tooth because she dared to call him by his first name in public. Banaz had previously informed the police that she feared for her life, but her concerns were ignored. The police failed to investigate her claims, neglecting to interview her family and husband to verify the accuracy of the information. She was told to contact them again if she felt threatened. Banaz and her boyfriend, Ramith, secretly met for about 2 months without being detected. However, in early December 2005, they were spotted by members of her family near a London subway station. This information was immediately reported to her father. That evening, her male relatives gathered at the family home, where they discussed her actions and deemed them unacceptable. Her uncle, Ari Mahmoud, declared that Banaz should be killed to restore the family's honor. Banaz overheard this conversation. Following this, Banaz went to the police again and explained that she had been under surveillance for months. She also told them that her family intended to kill her. She provided a list of 5 family members who were involved in the plot, but the police did not take her seriously. A serious mistake was made, which led to Banaz's disappearance. To uncover her fate, investigators must untangle a complicated network of lies, violence, and disregard for the truth. 2 weeks later, Banaz's father deceives her into visiting a relative's house, promising to discuss her divorce. Upon arrival, he forces her to drink brandy and leaves her alone in a room with the TV on. As she turns around, she sees her father putting on rubber gloves and reaching for a rope. Realizing her life is in danger, Banaz rushes to the front door, but it's locked. To escape, she breaks a window, cutting her hands on the shards. Banaz manages to reach a nearby cafe, where she collapses. Paramedics arrive and take her to the hospital, where the police are called. When Banaz regains consciousness, she contacts Rameth and asks him to come. After being discharged from the hospital, Banaz moves in with Rameth Soleimani. They celebrate the start of 2006 together and are happy. However, by mid-January, the Mohammed family begins to pressure Banaz to return home, supposedly to mend their relationship and discuss her marriage to Rameth. Banaz trusted her parents and agreed to return to her father's house, believing her mother would protect her if her father became violent. To be safe, Banaz went to the police station again and gave a full statement, including the names of people she thought might harm her. Despite her fears, she returned to her family home. On January 22, 2006, Rameth was attacked by 3 men in the street who tried to force him into a car. He managed to fight back and reported the incident to the police. 2 days later, Rameth and Banaz were due to give a statement at the police station, but Banaz failed to appear. Rameth attempted to reach Banaz Mohammed, but lost contact with her after she vanished upon returning to her family's residence. Rameth, who had been in constant touch with Banaz, grew increasingly worried and filed a missing persons report with the police. After numerous appeals, the police finally took action. The disappearance of Banaz Mohammed sparked an investigation led by the Homicide and Serious Crime Directorate, with Chief Inspector Caroline Good at the helm. Initially, it was suspected that Banaz was being held captive in a house within the community. To locate her, Inspector Good organized an extensive search of linked to the Mohammed family. Banaz's father, uncle, and ex-husband were brought in for questioning as suspects. The police also began searching for 3 other men listed by Banaz in December 2005, Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, and Mohammed Hama, all of whom were her cousins. However, when the police searched the neighborhood and tried to question her family members, and the family refused to cooperate with the investigation into her disappearance. Police found no photos of Banaz at her family's home, and her family's complete lack of concern shocked officers. Caroline Good then focused on 30 individuals, all of whom were arrested and questioned. During the investigation, over 20 vehicles and 300 cell phones were seized from those involved. Every person questioned attempted to hinder the investigation, providing conflicting accounts of Banaz's whereabouts. Some claimed to have seen her after she went missing, while others, including her mother, refused to cooperate with the police. Some even suggested she was in hiding. Realizing that no one would cooperate voluntarily, Caroline Good obtained permission to bug the cells of those arrested. At that point, Banaz's father, her uncle, and Mohammed Hama remained in police custody. 2 other men under investigation had managed to escape to Iraq. The detectives were horrified when they received the initial wiretap results. Not only did the 3 arrested men show no remorse, but they also took pleasure in recounting the details of Banaz's death. Their conversations revealed that on January 23, the Mohammed family intentionally left their home, allowing Omar Hussein and Hama to enter. Once inside, they attacked Banaz, subjecting her to a 2-hour ordeal of beatings and violence. As the torture came to an end, Hama wrapped a cord around Banaz's neck and strangled her. When recalling the final moments of Banaz's life, Hama couldn't contain his laughter. However, it was Mohammed Hama's admission of being present when Rameth was threatened that became the turning point in the case. While Hama was being held in a cell awaiting trial, his phone conversations were secretly recorded. Caroline Good listened to these recordings with growing horror as the suspect proudly described the gruesome details of the murder. In the recordings, Halma provided a detailed account of what they did to Banaz. Despite being terrified and vomiting, Banaz remained silent. Halma then wrapped the rope around her neck 3 times, pulling it so tight that it dug into her skin. As he continued to speak with excitement, he placed his feet on her back and pulled and tugged on the rope. Banaz clung to life until her last breath. It took the perpetrators over 30 minutes to kill Banaz. The brutality of the crime was too much for Caroline Good and the detectives, and they couldn't hold back their tears. Banaz's cousin, Dana Amin, 30, was present in the house and helped the perpetrator put Banaz's body in a suitcase. Muhammad Ali then dragged the suitcase out of the house to a waiting car nearby. Halma revealed that a police car drove by, but the officers didn't notice the suitcase, which had hair and an elbow protruding from it. The very people meant to protect Banaz were involved in plotting her murder. They strangled her with a shoelace, stuffed her body into a suitcase, and took it outside of London. Snippets of conversation mentioned a derelict house with a garden in Birmingham. Caroline Good used the information gathered and matched it with the movement data from the arrested suspects' phones to identify the search area. Due to the vastness of the area, the search could have taken a long time. During a conversation with the suspects, one of them suddenly turned to the other and asked if they had put the freezer back where it originally was. This sparked an idea for Caroline Good, now knew what to look for. A police helicopter was deployed to scan the area and spotted a house with a backyard filled with trash, including a white oblong object resembling a freezer that stood out among the black garbage bags. Upon closer inspection of the suspicious house, the officers' suspicions were confirmed. The police officers began digging, but as the hole reached shoulder depth, they were on the verge of giving up, all except Caroline Good. She recalled the words of Mohammed Hama, who had boasted to relatives that he had buried the victim so deep that she would only be found with the help of an informant. Caroline Good convinced the team to extend the search for another day. On the evening of April 28, 2006, their persistence paid off, and the suitcase was finally found. Unfortunately, Banaz's remains were in extremely poor condition, making it necessary to rely on dental records and DNA samples for identification. Her body was discovered folded into a fetal position, hidden in a suitcase and buried beneath a freezer in the garden of a Birmingham house. On May 1, 2006, the suspects were formally charged with the crime. However, they displayed no remorse, convinced that their actions were justified. Mohammed Hama even claimed that the case would not go to trial, as he believed he was simply carrying out an act of retaliation. Meanwhile, Caroline Good faced renewed opposition from the Kurdish diaspora community. Following the discovery of Banaz's remains, numerous individuals came forward to provide alibis for the suspects, claiming that they were in public on the day of the alleged and therefore could not have committed the crime. Approximately 50 individuals were involved or connected to Banaz's death in various capacities. Reflecting on the events, Caroline Good recalled feeling intense anger, disgust, and contempt for the men involved. She noted that 50 men had participated in the murder of one woman, and they took pride in their actions, which they saw as a demonstration of their masculinity. In March 2007, the trial against Mahmoud Babakar Mahmoud, Ari Mahmoud, and Mohammed Hamad began at London Central Criminal Court. Prosecutor Victor Temple described the crime as a cold-blooded and heartless execution that was orchestrated by the victim's father and uncle. In June 2007, a jury delivered finding all 3 defendants guilty of the charges and ineligible for leniency. The sentences handed down were severe. The father received a life sentence with a minimum of 20 years, the uncle was given life with a 23-year minimum, and cousin Mohammed Hama also received a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. Judge Brian Barker was scathing in his delivery of the verdict, stating, "You decided that your so-called family honor needed to be restored, which meant she had to die and her memory erased. This is a heinous and heartless crime. What kind of honor is it when a father prioritizes his social status over the life of his own child?" A mere 4 months after the trio's conviction, London police were informed that Muhammad Ali had been arrested in Iraq for a crime committed against a young boy. Muhammad Ali had taken his own life. Omar Hussein, the last of the 5 perpetrators, had been hiding in rural Iraq, attempting to avoid public detection. However, in December 2009, he was shot in the leg during an altercation with one of his brothers and required medical attention. Upon arriving at the hospital, police were notified and subsequently arrested him. Initially, Omar Hussein denied being in London in 2005, thereby claiming innocence in Banaz's death. But UK Social Security records revealed that he had been receiving refugee benefits during that time, contradicting his statement. The court ultimately sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. Dana Amin was given an 8 years prison sentence for his role in disposing of Banaz Mahmoud's body and hindering the investigation. A recorded interview with Banaz at a police station implicated her family in the crime. Banaz had previously handed in a letter to a police station in South London, naming individuals who threatened to kill her and her boyfriend Rameth. The individuals named in the letter were from Banaz's family and the wider Iraqi Kurdish community. They were angry about her decision to divorce her husband, who treated her poorly. Despite several attempts to leave him, Banaz returned due to family pressure. The police failed to respond properly to Banaz's situation, which ultimately resulted in her death. However, this case prompted significant changes in how honor-related cases are handled. An inquiry into police misconduct was launched after Banaz's death, and an independent commission investigated 9 police officers for their inadequate response to her allegations. 7 officers received reprimands, and 2 were dismissed. It is essential to recognize the tireless efforts of Caroline Good and her team, who successfully located Banaz's body, secured the conviction of her father and uncle, and brought the escaped perpetrators back from Iraq. Banaz was laid to rest at the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery in Morden. A memorial service was held in her honor on June 26, 2007, at the MN Auditorium, followed by the installation of a granite memorial headstone at her gravesite. The memorial was attended by a small group of people, including Rameth Soleimani, Caroline Good, and Banaz's 2 sisters. Notably, Banaz's family did not attend either service. Rameth Soleimani, who had been living in the UK under witness protection, was profoundly affected by Banaz's death. He penned a heartfelt letter expressing his love and grief, describing Banaz as the love of his life and his entire world. Unfortunately, his pain and suffering continued, and in May 2016, 10 years after the tragedy, he took his own life. This was his 3rd attempt to end his life, a devastating consequence of the trauma he had endured. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30, 1987, in South Africa. Her life took a drastic turn when her father passed away when she was just 10 years old. Overwhelmed by grief, her family moved to live with relatives in Whitby, United Kingdom. However, the move did not bring the peace they had hoped for, and they eventually returned to South Africa. When Carmen turned 18, she decided to leave behind with her relatives and later relocated to London to pursue her education. She earned a master's degree in marketing and quickly became known for her charismatic and outgoing personality. Carmen formed strong bonds with many people and became a loyal friend and companion. However, living in a big city like London came with its expenses, and Carmen had to work hard to maintain a decent standard of living. By day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and by night, she worked part-time at a gentleman's club. Although her career choices may have raised eyebrows, Carmen was a woman of principle and never compromised her values. She conducted herself with dignity and earned the respect of her clients. It was during her time at the club that she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Brad was born in April 1978 in New Zealand to parents who separated when he was just 9 years old. He stayed with his mother and later moved to Australia. Brad graduated from university in 2001 with a degree in construction engineering. He was then offered a job as a chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK by a prominent construction company. To navigate the complex's high-stakes negotiations and enhance his professional status, Brad sought the services of a gentleman's agency, where he met Carmen. She was intelligent, tall, and beautiful, with striking dark eyes and black hair. However, Brad's demanding career and ambitious nature left him little time for a serious relationship. Despite this, Brad and Carmen got along well after a dinner, and their casual interactions eventually blossomed into a solid friendship. Over time, their friendship deepened into a romance, and they began living together. Their relationship was built on mutual trust, care, and support. When Carmen got pregnant, Brad decided it would be better to go back to New Zealand, a country with cleaner air and a more laid-back lifestyle. In March 2005, they returned to Auckland. After the birth of their son Jack, they experienced immense happiness. They prioritized Jack's safety and well-being, making sure he had everything he needed for a happy childhood. However, the arrival of their son brought significant challenges to their relationship. The first problems arose in the relationship between Carmen and Brad due to disagreements on how to raise their child, causing tension and instability. After 3 years, they decided to go their separate ways, but shared joint custody of their son, Jack. The breakup was challenging for both, but they made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for Jack's sake. Carmen and Jack eventually moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Oakland. With time, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started a new life without Brad. In 2008, she and her son relocated to a house on a street near Brad's, so Jack could be close to his father. Having lost her own father at a young age, Carmen wanted to ensure Jack always had a father figure in his life. Despite her decision to live near Brad, Carmen's friends and family believed she and Brad still had a good friendship, but in reality, they only spent time together when it was related to Jack. As time passed, life continued for Carmen. After parting ways, Carmen and Brad each attempted to move on. Brad resumed his career as a construction engineer and, in May 2009, began a new relationship, which ultimately led to an engagement. Meanwhile, Carmen devoted herself to raising their son and, much to Brad's dismay, returned to her work at a gentleman's club. This choice troubled Brad. Carmen repeatedly presented Brad with ultimatums, but he dismissed her requests, focusing on his impending marriage and plans for fatherhood once again. This marked the beginning of adjustments to his financial commitments, specifically affecting the alimony payments for the maintenance of their son, Jack, which Brad made in accordance with their agreement. However, Carmen viewed the financial constraints as a catalyst in an escalating series of conflicts. Tensions escalated until March 19, 2010, when a domestic violence incident occurred. Police responded to a neighbor's call about a dispute and mediated the situation. As a result, Carmen received a formal warning from law enforcement. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to discuss a new school for Jack and to sign a written agreement for child support. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and asked Brad to leave, yelling that Jack was not his son as he departed. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to contact Carmen again, but she did not respond. On July 13, 2010, Brad reported Carmen missing to the police, who began searching for her. Through video footage and interviews with neighbors, investigators were able to reconstruct a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance. They discovered that on June 29th, a surveillance camera at a nearby supermarket had captured footage of Carmen, providing a potential lead in the search. During their investigation of the rented house where Carmen and Jack lived, police noticed that there was no outdoor garbage can. Inside the house, they found bloodstains on the front door, washing machine, sink, and shower. To confirm the presence of blood, forensic scientists used luminol, a substance that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of blood on the bathroom door and floor. The landlord reported that on June 29th, she heard loud screaming, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. When she knocked on Carmen's door, no one answered. She looked out the window and saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack, which caught her attention. She called her husband, but before he arrived, Brad walked out of the house, carrying soiled clothes. He told the landlord that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlord noticed that Brad appeared to have just taken a shower. She had no reason to doubt his story, so she didn't call the police. The search for Carmen continued, and her cell phone activity caught the police's attention. Although messages were being sent from her phone regularly, the tone and language used were unusual and didn't match her previous communication style. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10th. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found, and in the back seat, they discovered her luggage, clothes, and other personal belongings. The police investigation into Carmen's disappearance began with the examination of her seized suitcase, which revealed traces of blood and a note indicating she owed money to her employer. An envelope with Misty's name and $270 was also found in the glove compartment. Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after finding blood in the car and launched a search for Carmen's body in the countryside southeast of Auckland, but it was inconclusive. As the investigation continued, police analyzed Carmen's and Brad's phones, discovering they had been in close proximity to each other during the search. However, Carmen's phone was not connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had disappeared from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen vanished. A neighbor reported seeing the can being taken away through her window. Police suspected the trash can might have been used to dispose of evidence. When EE examined Brad's phone records and bank card details, then they found that on June 30th, Brad had purchased a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and several garbage bags, which raised suspicions. By studying Brad's daily routine, police identified some unusual events, including a day when he arrived early at the construction site and walked alone around the property for an extended period. While it was not unusual for a supervisor to be on site early, the police found it noteworthy. After gathering evidence, including Carmen's cell phone and suspicious purchases, they began to suspect Brad of murder. They believed Brad had killed his former lover, Carmen Thomas, by hitting her multiple times in the head and then carefully hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to obstruct justice. Brad's second son was born while he was in custody, causing him to become emotional and resentful. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators the location of Carmen's body. It turned out that Brad had attempted to create an alibi by making it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never returned. However, under questioning, he eventually detailed the events of the day Carmen was killed, revealing that his plan had not been as perfect as he thought. Brad admitted that Carmen and Brad had a heated argument, which ended with Carmen telling Brad that Jack was not his son. In a fit of rage, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house. However, he returned 5 minutes later, grabbed a baseball bat, and brutally attacked Carmen, striking her in the head with such force that she fell unconscious, bleeding profusely. Despite realizing the gravity of his actions, Brad continued to assault Carmen, throwing several punches. Memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but his anger and resentment consumed him. Brad knew his life would never be the same after this moment, and he could never undo the damage. Nevertheless, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, believing that he had solved his problem and ensured that Jack was now his alone. Brad regained his composure, took a shower, and quietly left Carmen's house. In the following days, he devised a plan to dispose of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. He met his friend outside a supermarket and asked him to buy black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning products, hoping to avoid raising suspicion. Brad then returned to the apartment, meticulously cleaned up the bloodstains, wrapped Carmen's body in a bag, and disposed of it in a trash can. After killing Carmen, Brad dismembered her body into 8 pieces to make it easier to dispose of. He cut off her legs at the hip joints and then cut each leg in half at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. A few days later, on July 3rd, Brad met a friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay, near downtown Oakland. He confessed to his friend that he had killed Carmen during an argument and asked for help disposing of her body. However, his friend refused to provide a boat to dump the remains into the sea. Over the next few days, Brad drove to Ware Ridge in West Auckland and buried the dismembered body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He left a suitcase of clothes and some of her personal belongings in the car to make it seem like she had left voluntarily. However, he made a critical mistake by including bloody clothes in the suitcase. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Brad started sending text messages from Carmen's cell phone to her friends, pretending to be her. He claimed that she was not feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. However, this plan ultimately backfired on him. On October 1st, police excavated the burial site indicated by Brad and found the body of Carmen Thomas. Her remains were discovered in plastic containers, carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Wayfair Ridge. An autopsy revealed that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family on October 13th. Tragically, her young son Jack, who had been waiting and hoping to see his mother again, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, Brad Callahan's first court hearing was held. Judge Winning determined that the crime was unintentional and took into account Brad's claim that he acted impulsively in a state of rage. However, the judge was more severe in his assessment of the subsequent cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A retrial was held on November 25, 2011, where police officers filled the High Court in Auckland. In a surprise move, Brad Callahan made 2 guilty pleas, admitting to murder and attempting to change the course of justice after Carmen's death. A judge has sentenced 31-year-old Brad Callahan to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas. Brad was also given a 6-year sentence for attempting to interfere with the investigation into Thomas's death. The judge considered this one of the most serious cases of attempted interference with justice, describing Brad's actions as extremely serious. During the trial at Auckland High Court, the judge criticized the brutality of Thomas's murder, but decided not to impose the harshest possible sentence. The courtroom was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venin condemned Brad's attempts to cover up his crime, which involved considerable effort and deception. The 6-year sentence for interfering with the investigation will be served at the same time as the life sentence. In a statement, the Thomas family expressed their ongoing anger and grief, saying that no punishment can bring their daughter back. However, they are relieved that Brad will be in prison for a long time, giving him the opportunity to reflect on the harm he has caused. Little boy Jack Brad is living with his grandmother in another town under an assumed name. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan grew up in Canada, in a large family with his parents, Bill and Susan. Bill works at the Toronto Star Daily newspaper and spends time on his many interests, including sports, yoga, and psychology, which help balance family life. In addition, his wife, Susan, is able to manage the household, take care of the children, and keep their Toronto home clean. Passers-by often stop to admire the family's beautiful and blooming garden. Although Susan loved her sons equally, but Brett seemed to be less criticized because he was generally well-behaved. Brett was very clever at getting out of difficult situations, which gave the impression that he was a good boy, although this was not always the case. Brett was extremely popular in school, with everyone wanting to be his friend or at least be able to greet him by name, just like his older brothers. After high school, Brett attended university, driven by a desire to surpass his brother's achievements. To earn extra money, he placed an ad in the local newspaper, offering to paint houses and fences for Toronto residents. At first, his business was quite successful and Brett felt proud, especially with his first income. His mother, Susan, was thrilled and often cited him as a role model for others. However, things took a turn when Brett dropped out of college to focus full-time on his paint business. Without a degree, he had to work full-time as a paint salesman, which deprived him of formal education and exposed him to paint fumes on a regular basis. For a while, Brett felt confident and superior to his brothers, but this soon changed. After a couple of years, his brothers, Christopher and Leland, graduated and landed jobs in their specialized fields. Christopher worked for the Toronto Transit Commission, and Leland became the family artist and designer. As they established their careers and moved out of their parents' home, Brett's power began to diminish significantly. To save money on rent, Brett continued to live with his parents and younger brother, who attended a school for gifted children. Brett's financial situation grew more dire over time. By 2007, when he turned 26, his debt had surged to more than $60,000. This burden led to depression, but despite his inner turmoil, Brett maintained a cheerful exterior, always willing to lend a helping hand and participate in volunteer work. His friends and acquaintances were unaware of the immense emotional pain he was hiding. Brett faced a severe situation on October 28, 2007. With winter approaching, he had no orders. Left with no other choice, Brett wore his oldest clothes, including a hat, a long sweater his brother had given him, and a long scarf his mother had knitted. It was the first time he had worn the scarf, but it was finally coming in handy. He wrapped it around his face, leaving only a narrow slit for his eyes, and headed for the bank that was on the outskirts of his neighborhood. Brett stood in line at the bank, holding a thick folder and favoring his right foot as he waited his turn. When the bank employee called him forward, he approached her and spoke in a hushed tone. He calmly informed her that he had a gun and urged her to remove all the cash from the register and hand it over to him. He warned her that if she didn't comply, he would start shooting, and she would be the first person he would harm. She, with trembling hands, handed him all the cash from the register. Brett quietly exited the building, careful not to draw the attention of the guardians. Once outside, Brett took off running. He counted the money he had stolen from the bank, but it wasn't much, just over $1,000. To pay off his debt, he calculated that he would need to rob about 60 more banks, a crazy idea, but to him it seemed like the only option. For the first few days, Brett was fearful that the police would somehow catch up with him, so he avoided going home. He told his mother he had a job in a neighboring town and spent his nights sleeping in his car. Periodically, Brett would sneak back to his house to check if there were any police cars staking out the area. Finding none, he felt reassured that he was in the clear. The first robbery was followed by a second, then a third, and a fourth. Each time, Brett changed his clothes, opting for second-hand or discarded items he found in the trash. He would burn the used clothes after each crime. Brett also bought a beard from a costume party store to further disguise himself. Brett committed a string of bank robberies in the Toronto area, and his distinctive beard made a lasting impression on the witnesses. His total intended theft across all instances never exceeded $3,000. Brett's luck ran out when police spotted his car on surveillance cameras and followed him home. They tracked his exact route, gathering details from various vehicles to prove his guilt. Further inquiries yielded little new information, so the authorities closely tracked a particular road in an attempt to shed light on the case. Their patience and hard work finally paid off. They found a potential lead. This person of interest, a bearded man, was found walking alone near a bank and was promptly detained by the officer for further investigation. Brett was under investigation for 7 months before being charged with robbery with a firearm, despite having a gun permit. Notably, he never actually carried a gun or any other weapon during the robberies. He didn't even bring a kitchen knife. Initially, he was charged with 19 counts, but after multiple appeals filed by him and his family, only 8 of those counts were upheld. Upon being given the opportunity to apply for parole, Brett submitted a petition. In it, he asked the authorities to consider the circumstances that led him to commit the crimes, including severe depression caused by 2 failed relationships and a significant amount of debt. He also reiterated that he had never intended to harm anyone during the robberies, as evidenced by his lack of weapons. His remarks were taken into account, but as a condition of his potential parole, he was required to undergo a session with a psychologist. The sessions had a positive impact on Brett. During his time in prison, he had lost touch with his family, but he took the initiative to reconnect with them. The positive changes in Brett were noticed by the commissioners, and on November 24, 2010, he was released from prison. However, the freedom he had fought so hard for turned out to be more challenging than he had anticipated. Prior to his career as a painter, Brett struggled with deep emotional pain that weighed heavily on him. He had previously been a bank robber and served time in prison, which damaged his reputation. As a result, no company would hire him, and even those who initially hired him for house painting services would cancel once they discovered his true identity. The neighbors, who once admired Susan's garden and visited frequently, now spread unpleasant rumors about the family. The Brett family quickly sold their house and relocated to Scarborough. Susan started a new garden, and Brett found a job with a trading company. Although the pay was low, his parents helped him financially to rebuild his life and continue his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist, who consistently advised him to maintain a strong connection with his family. Brett's life took a turn for the better when he met Kristen Baxter in September 2011. Kristen was an amazing person who had her own apartment with a stunning sea view. She was also into sports, which helped her stay in shape. What Brett appreciated most about her was that she didn't care about his past. They enjoyed traveling together, including a trip to Australia. Brett's parents were thrilled to see their son in a happy relationship and were confident that Kristen would encourage him to reach his full potential. However, just when everything was going well, tragedy struck. Brett's father passed away, leaving him in shock and sending him into a depressive state. As a result, Brett started visiting his psychologist more frequently to cope with his emotions. Brett was juggling 2 responsibilities: supporting his mother financially and nurturing his relationship with Kristen. They were both young adults, eager to build a stronger and more significant relationship with each other. Brett fell deeply in love with Kristen and decided to carry out an important plan. He had some savings and, after discussing his plans with his mother, decided to propose to Kristen with a ring. His mother supported his decision and gave him money to buy a ring. Although Kristen didn't need an expensive gift, Brett chose a gold ring with a large diamond to make the proposal special. Kristen happily accepted his proposal. As they began planning their wedding, Brett agreed with Kristen's decisions, but he was worried about the high costs and how they would affect his job. Brett found a job opening at a large technology company on the internet and applied for it. He updated his resume and submitted it, and was even invited for an interview, which he successfully passed. As a result, he was offered the job and was thrilled. He eagerly shared the news with his fiancée and mother, and asked them for money to buy an expensive suit for work. His mother agreed to help him, and he purchased the suit. However, just as Brett was about to start his new job, the company called him to inform him that they had to withdraw their offer. The security department had discovered his past criminal record, and the company could no longer hire him. This news was devastating for Brett, and his mood plummeted. He felt like giving up on his job search and education, wondering why he was wasting his time applying for jobs that he would never get due to his past mistakes. He decided that it would be better to use the money his mother and brothers had given him for something else. Brett had dropped out of university, but he didn't tell his family or his counselor. To maintain the illusion of success, Brett would wear a suit and tie, then change into casual clothes on the way to his job as a house painter. He would tell his relatives that he worked in an office. To further deceive his loved ones, Brett would post fake photos on social media, pretending to be at work or attending business events. He would also fake phone calls, making it seem like he was busy with work-related issues. Brett's family had no idea that he was hiding the truth about his life. As Brett's wedding to Kristen approached in September 2016, his deception reached new heights. He rented an expensive restaurant for the reception, which cost $100 per guest. His family was thrilled, believing that Brett had finally turned his life around with a prestigious job and a beautiful fiancée. However, Brett's deceptions became so overwhelming that he could no longer control his lies. Brett's wedding was just a month away, and he was struggling to cover the costs. He had been borrowing money from his mother, but when she could no longer help him, he pressured her to find a higher-paying job. Meanwhile, he was planning a bachelor party and had invited all his friends and brothers. Brett had a secret. He had been lying to his family for a year about working as an engineer for a technology company. When he finally confessed to his counselor, the counselor advised him to come clean to his mother. After much procrastination, Brett told his mother the truth, which devastated her. She bragged to everyone about her son's success. Brett's mother demanded that he tell his fiancée, Kristen, the truth, threatening to do so herself if he didn't. She also warned him that his brothers were aware of the situation and were on her side. However, Brett couldn't bring himself to confess to Kristen, despite knowing that the wedding was unlikely to happen due to his deception. With less than a month to go before the wedding, Brett remained silent, knowing that Kristen deserved to know the truth before it was too late. Brett was anxious about his mother revealing a potentially scandalous secret to his fiancée, Kristen. Every time her phone rang, he would tense up, holding his breath until he realized it wasn't his mother on the line, but rather one of Kristen's friends inquiring about her wedding plans. Eventually, Brett came up with a plan to silence his mother for good. As a convicted felon, Brett was prohibited from owning firearms. He decided to use a crossbow, a silent and deadly weapon, to carry out his plan. Interestingly, his late father had taught him how to shoot a crossbow at targets in their garden, a hobby that Brett had excelled at. Brett purchased the crossbow and arrows at a local sporting goods store and hid them in his garage, disguising them among construction debris. He also created a fake alibi by rigging his computer to automatically post pre-written comments on YouTube. He achieved this by attaching a spoon to a fan, which was connected to his computer. The fan was set to a timer, making it seem like Brett was actively using his computer at the time of the crime. Brett made everyone believe that he spent the whole day at home, watching videos and commenting on them. However, on the morning of August 25th, he had other plans. He put on disguising clothes that concealed his face, sneaked out of the house through the back door to avoid the security cameras, and took a train to his parents' house. He wants to eliminate anyone who might stand in the way of the peaceful life he and Kristen are building. When Brett arrived at his parents' house, his mother, Susan, was taken aback by his unexpected visit. She wasn't feeling well that day, but Brett persisted in persuading her not to reveal his plans to his future wife. Despite her poor health, Susan firmly refused to comply with Brett's demands. As he continued to pressure her, Brett's anger escalated, and Susan sensed that something was terribly wrong. She noticed the crazed look in her son's eyes and warned him that she had already called for help and that Christopher was on his way. Brett's anger reached a boiling point. He rushed to the garage, grabbed a crossbow, but his rage and adrenaline surge made him unable to aim properly. Instead, he used the crossbow's butt to bludgeon his mother. To ensure she was dead, he tightened a rope around her neck. After covering her body with plastic bags, Brett loaded the crossbow with arrows, ready to face whoever was coming next. Brett's brother Christopher was lured into a trap by the suspect. As he entered the garage or the yard, Brett, who was hiding in the bushes, ambushed and shot Christopher in the neck. Christopher died shortly after the attack. Alexander, the youngest brother, was the next target. The suspect had also managed to lure him, but Alexander's outcome was different. Shot in the neck with an arrow, Alexander was critically injured but didn't die instantly. He screamed and cried for help as the attack took place. Throughout this violence, Leland remained asleep on the second floor, oblivious to the crime happening nearby and to the identity of the perpetrator, who was also a family member. It was Alexander's screams that startled Leland out of sleep, ran downstairs, and stumbled upon the horrific scene of his brother Brett trying to strangle Alexander. A fight broke out between Leland and Brett, and Leland ended up in control, forcing Brett to back down. Leland immediately fled to a neighbor's house and called the police. With no means of escape, Brett remained in the house, realizing too late that his actions had disastrous consequences. In a desperate attempt to make amends, he composed a text message to Kristen, pleading for her forgiveness. Upon arriving at the scene, police officers found Brett, covered in blood, sitting beside his critically injured brother Alexander, who would later succumb to his injuries in the hospital. Brett voluntarily surrendered to the authorities, requesting to be handcuffed and taken into custody. During his confession, he revealed the location of his mother's body, hidden beneath packages in the garage, and acknowledged that she was beyond help. Brett admitted at the police station during the trial that he had not intended to kill Susan, but rather to scare her. In contrast, he had planned to kill Christopher and Alexander, who were witnesses to the crime. If they had not been present, they would still be alive. Brett attempted to justify his actions by citing his struggles with depression, but this did not lead to a more lenient sentence. Despite Brett's cooperation with the investigation and his voluntary confession, the judge imposed 3 life sentences, 1 for each murder. Brett will be eligible for parole in 2041. Leland, the sole survivor of the incident, has refused to speak to reporters, but he is well known in Toronto as the one who narrowly escaped the carnage. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Matthew Patrick Podolak. Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak was born on June 10, 1975 in Ohio, USA to Patricia Romano and Leonard Podolak. During his high school years, Matthew was a member of the school hockey team. After graduating, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Following his naval service, Matthew secured a job at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. However, he struggled to get along with his colleagues. According to his sister Chrissy Duca, some coworkers disliked him, possibly due to jealousy over his expected promotion and his uncle's plans to groom him to take over the business. Matthew enjoyed pursuing outdoor activities, such as boating, camping, and hunting. In his free time, he also played softball and hockey. Matthew met Holly McFeature in 2003, and they began dating shortly after. They eventually moved in together in a home in Cleveland. Their friends described Matthew as a man overjoyed to have found someone to settle down with and start a family. Within a year, they had their first child, a daughter named Samantha, and about 2 years later, they had a son named Josh. The family also included a third child from Holly's previous relationship. Matthew's mother, Patricia, described how her son fell deeply in love, giving himself 110% to the relationship. He was truly devoted to Holly. However, by 2005, their romance had deteriorated, becoming argumentative, strained, and divisive. Whenever Matthew and Holly quarreled, he would leave home and spend the night at a friend's place. This wasn't an isolated incident, and his friends repeatedly urged him to break off the relationship, warning him about Holly's selfish behavior. Despite their concerns, Matthew refused to listen and always went back to her. Matthew held a life insurance policy that named Holly McFeature as the beneficiary. Despite friends warning Matthew to remove Holly from the list of beneficiaries, he refused to do so. Russell, Matthew's closest friend, portrayed Matthew's emotional state as fluctuating wildly, veering from extreme happiness to intense anger, upset, tears, and occasional fear. Russell also testified that he was aware Matthew had sunk into depression during that period. According to Russell, Matthew was overly ecstatic about his future life and was particularly enthusiastic about raising all 3 kids. However, given the unstable situation, Russell cautioned Matthew that he needed to take precautions to safeguard himself and remove any firearms from the house. In 2006, after the hockey season came to an end, Matthew turned to online gambling, which led to significant financial losses. His family and friends soon became aware that he was struggling with his mental health, as he was clearly unwell and depressed. At the urging of his loved ones, Matthew sought medical attention from a doctor, who subsequently prescribed him antidepressant medication. By Memorial Day weekend, Russell Harry had become very worried about Matthew's physical health. After enlisting Matthew's help to move a motor from one boat to another, Russell noticed some alarming changes. Matthew, once very strong, had now gained weight and was sweating excessively. He was also complaining of back pain and felt he had lost his strength. Russell urged Matthew to see a doctor and even recommended a specific physician, Dr. Thomas Mandat. Matthew saw Dr. Mandat on July 26, 2006. During this visit, Russell overheard Holly yelling at Matthew in the background, telling him he was too stupid to know which doctor he was supposed to see. At the appointment, Matthew complained about back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed Matthew with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help pass the stones and alleviate the associated pain. On July 30th, Matthew phoned his father to share the news that he had purchased a fishing rod for his daughter and was eager to take her and his father on a fishing trip in the near future. His father reported that Matthew sounded enthusiastic and was looking forward to their outing. Later that same evening, Matthew attended a party hosted by Russell, who would later testify that Matthew's physical appearance was alarming. He had put on even more weight, was sweating excessively, and struggled to walk without support. Additionally, Matthew complained of severe back pain. Later that evening, Holly reached out to Matthew's father to inform him that she had called 911 because Matthew was in distress. The father had a brief conversation with his son over the phone and found him to be confused and extremely upset. Following the ambulance's arrival, Matthew was rushed to Parma General Hospital due to suspected organ failure. It was eventually discovered that Matthew's kidneys had failed, and the doctors diagnosed him with metabolic acidosis, a condition where his blood had become excessively acidic. Dr. Mandad, a member of the emergency medical team, suspected that Matthew might have ingested a toxic substance, such as methanol or antifreeze. He and the team questioned Holly, who was present, about the possibility of Matthew having swallowed antifreeze or medical alcohol. However, she denied that Matthew had taken anything. On July 31, 2006, Matthew Podek passed away in the hospital due to kidney failure. According to Dr. Mandad's testimony, metabolic acidosis is typically caused by respiratory problems. However, that was not the cause in this case. Dr. Mandad clarified that ethylene glycol is another possible cause of metabolic acidosis, which is what happened here. Matthew's death was devastating to his family and friends, but Holly seemed unaffected. Rebecca Vega, Holly's friend, testified that she had reached out to Holly to offer support in the days that followed Matthew's death. Vega accompanied Holly to the funeral home to help make arrangements, and was struck by Holly's complete lack of emotional response, neither sadness nor shock. Matthew's father stated that during the wake, he had to request Holly McFeature to enter the room where the casket was located, so that she could receive visitors. However, she appeared to be emotionally numb, as if she felt nothing. Similarly, Russell Harry described Holly's behavior as if she was attending a celebration, completely unaffected by the recent events. A remarkable detail surfaced shortly after. The day following Matthew's death, August 1st, Holly used an ATM to withdraw cash using Matthew's bank card. Furthermore, she wrote checks in his name, effectively draining his bank account. Holly was subsequently arrested and charged with 2 counts of forgery after Matthew's mother notified the authorities about the suspicious activity. In the end, Holly agreed to pay restitution and received a 1-year probation sentence. Her family claimed she had only been trying to obtain money to support the couple's children in Matthew's absence. Holly McFay was listed as a beneficiary on Matthew's life insurance policy, but the payout was relatively small, totaling just $10,000, which she received 2 weeks after his death. During a visit to Holly's home, her friend Rebecca Vega noticed cleaning solvents left out in the open in the kitchen, which she found concerning given the presence of young children. When Vega inquired about the substances, Holly explained that one of the items was antifreeze, which Matthew had used to winterize his boat. Matthew's best friend, Russell, testified that Matthew hadn't owned a working boat since 2004 or 2005, when the engine failed. Michael Jama, a Cleveland police officer who had known Holly McPhee since 2002, would often visit her house for coffee and conversation. He'd typically call ahead to avoid interrupting another man's visit. One day, he called to check if he was catching her at a bad time, and she told him not to worry about it anymore, explaining that Matthew had passed away the previous week. The officer was struck by her casual tone, which seemed careless and heartless to him. After Matthew's death, Holly had his computer handed over to a friend who then removed certain content from the hard drive. She also cut up his clothes to make a quilt, which meant that his father and brother were left with no clothing items to remember him by. 6 weeks later, Holly started dating Charles Lightbaum, a police officer from Cleveland. At first, she told him that her ex-boyfriend had died from kidney failure. However, she later changed her story after the autopsy results were released in January 2007, revealing that Matthew Podek's system contained a large amount of ethylene glycol, the active ingredient found in antifreeze. Holly confided in her new lover, Charles Lightbaum, that Matthew might have intentionally taken something to end his life. The autopsy report revealed that Matthew Podek's death was caused by chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the coroner was unable to determine whether it was an accident, suicide, or homicide. Holly also told Sean Walsh that Matthew had died in an industrial accident, suggesting that a colleague might have poisoned him out of jealousy due to his privileged position as the boss's nephew. However, Matthew's family suspected that the person responsible might have been someone within their inner circle. In 2007, after Holly moved away, detectives visited her former house and seized 2 bottles of antifreeze from the garage, as documented in the police report. Later that year, following her breakup with Charles Lightbaum, Holly met Jamison Kennedy at the bar where she worked. This was in the spring of 2008. Notably, Holly did not share any information about Matthew's death with Jameson. It is worth mentioning that Jameson Kennedy had a substantial criminal record and struggled with alcohol and drug abuse. One day in September 2008, Holly and Jameson were together, drinking and intimate, when Holly became emotional and started discussing Matthew. She broke down in tears, saying she wanted to escape the situation and leave Cleveland behind. She expressed regret over what had happened. Jameson asked her what she was sorry about, and Holly confided that she had tampered with Matthew's drinks, causing him to fall ill over time and eventually leading to his death. Jameson was unsure if she was telling the truth. Following Holly's confession, Jameson met with an old friend, Santiago Feliciano, a lawyer. Jameson shared Holly's admission with Santiago, who advised him to report the information to the authorities if he believed it to be true. After Jameson discussed Holly's confession with her, he called her to clarify the details. But during their phone conversation, Holly vehemently denied ever harming Matthew, accusing Jameson of misquoting her. She insisted she never told him about putting anything in his drink and would never do such a thing. The incident marked the beginning of the end of their relationship. Jameson accused Holly of cheating on him on November 8, 2008, and confronted her at her house to discuss his suspicions. Feeling scared, Holly called the police. When the officers arrived, Jameson attacked them, leading to his arrest and charge of assault. Jameson Kennedy was later found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison for assaulting the officers. Not only that, but after his arrest, he also informed the police about Holly's alleged confession. He refused to protect the person responsible for his own arrest. As a result, more and more evidence pointed to Holly McPhee's involvement in Matthew Podolak's death. The police initially investigated Matthew's death in 2007, following the release of the autopsy report. However, they did not initially suspect foul play, which led to a lengthy delay in the case. Let's examine the autopsy report in more detail. As a seasoned forensic pathologist and medical examiner with over 10 years of experience, Dr. Galita's job involved performing autopsies and determining the causes and nature of death. With more than 3,500 autopsies under his belt, he was well equipped to conduct the autopsy on Podolak, which he did the day after Podolak's death. 6 months after the incident, in January 2007, the autopsy report detailing the findings was released. The report, which was signed by the doctor and the county coroner, Dr. Elizabeth Balge, concluded that Tupac's death was caused by chronic intoxication due to ethylene glycol, although the manner in which this occurred remained undetermined. Dr. Galita explains that the ethylene glycol Matthew Podolak ingested entered his bloodstream and was quickly metabolized by alcohol dehydrogenase in his liver. This enzyme facilitates certain chemical reactions in the body. The resulting metabolite was converted into oxalate, which then combined with calcium to form calcium oxalate crystals. A large quantity of these crystals accumulated in Matthew's kidneys, hindering their proper function. Dr. Galita stated that Matthew's flank pain, which began in May 2006, was caused by crystals in his kidneys. An examination of Matthew's kidneys revealed not only damage, but also signs of the kidneys attempting to heal. Additionally, Dr. Galita discovered crystals in Matthew's heart and brain and diagnosed him with severe acute myocarditis, an acute inflammation of the heart muscle. According to Dr. Galita, Matthew's myocarditis could not have developed from a single instance of ethylene glycol ingestion, but rather required at least 3 weeks to develop. Furthermore, Dr. Galita ruled out the possibility that Matthew had suffered a heart attack. Dr. Galita reached the conclusion that Matthew's death was caused by long-term poisoning from ethylene glycol. She believed that this poisoning happened due to a series of acute, but non-fatal, intoxications that occurred over a period of at least 3 months. Matthew's friends stated that his go-to drink was raspberry iced tea, which he would often bring to work in a thermos or in its original packaging, whether it was a half-gallon or whole-gallon container. According to his friend Michael Mahal, Holly McFeature would occasionally bring Matthew lunch at work, and it would always come with a half-gallon or whole-gallon container of iced tea. In August 2007, the police collected 2 bottles of antifreeze, one from Peak and one from Saturn, from the garage of McFeature's former home. This was 3 years after she had moved out, and also after the autopsy results had been released in 2010. The coroner's report was later amended, and Dr. Frank Miller, the then county coroner, signed off on the updated document. Although the cause of death remained the same, the amended report changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide, concluding that Podolak's death was a result of chronic ethylene glycol intoxication and was indeed a homicide. 6 years after Matthew Podolak's death, the authorities finally decided to arrest Holly McFeature in connection with his passing. In July 2012, they charged her with 2 counts: aggravated deprivation of Matthew's life and contaminating a substance for human consumption or use. Matthew's older brother, Mark Podolak, revealed that his family had long suspected McFeature's involvement in his brother's death, citing her unusual behavior. She didn't seem like someone who was grieving or about to lose a loved one. The investigators believed that Holly had been secretly adding antifreeze to Matthew's cold raspberry tea over a period of weeks or even months. She pleaded not guilty to the charges and appeared in court in 2013. The case against Holly rested solely on circumstantial evidence. During the trial, the prosecution called 15 witnesses, including Matthew's family and friends, Dr. Galita, Dr. Thomas Mandat, Matthew's doctor, and several police officers involved in the investigation. These witnesses testified about Holly's behavior, a phone call Matthew made before visiting the doctor, and the fact that Matthew had not owned a working boat since 2004, so he had no reason to use antifreeze for that purpose. Holly's lawyers claimed that Matthew's family and friends were convinced of her guilt and immediately launched a vigorous campaign targeting law enforcement agencies to ensure she was brought to justice after his death. The state's primary witness was Dr. Galita, the medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Matthew's body. During his extensive testimony, Dr. Galita explained how he arrived at the conclusion that Matthew had been subjected to chronic poisoning over a period of 3 months. He pointed out that he discovered crystals in Matthew's kidneys and cardiac myocarditis, both of which can be caused by exposure to ethylene glycol. He ruled out other possible causes of myocarditis, including bacterial, fungal, and viral infections. Furthermore, Dr. Galita testified that if Matthew had experienced a single acute exposure to ethylene glycol, myocarditis would not have developed. Galita clarified why he altered the original autopsy report 3 years later. At the time in 2007, the coroner's office lacked sufficient information to conclude that the death was a result of intentional life deprivation, so the manner of death was initially classified as undetermined. The testimonies of other witnesses supported Dr. Galita's findings on the cause of death. Matthew's friends testified that Podolak's health started to decline in the spring of 2006, and he was diagnosed with kidney stones in July of that year, with his health continuing to deteriorate afterwards. As for the relationship between Podolak and McFeature, the state's witnesses stated that it had become increasingly volatile. Matthew seemed fearful, and one of his friends even advised him to take his weapons out of the house, which he did. Holly's lawyers claimed their client was not responsible for Matthew's death. They suggested that Matthew, who was struggling with depression due to online gambling losses, work issues, and communication problems with his young child, intentionally took a lethal dose of antifreeze. The defense also argued that Matthew died from a single dose, rather than multiple doses taken over several weeks or months. To support this, they presented Dr. Robert Bucks, the coroner from El Paso County, Colorado. He testified that Matthew suffered from acute poisoning, which indicated a one-time ingestion of ethylene glycol and suggested that Matthew wanted to end his life. Dr. Bucks disagreed with Dr. Galita's finding of myocarditis, instead believing Matthew had a heart attack. He also stated that a person can have myocarditis without ethylene glycol poisoning, and that flank pain is not a symptom of ethylene glycol poisoning. Additionally, Dr. Bucks claimed there was no connection between kidney stones and ethylene glycol poisoning. The state presented evidence that despite struggling with depression, Matthew was dedicated to being a good father to his children and had made plans with them as recently as the day before his death. Additionally, there was evidence that he had sought medical help for both his mental and physical health issues. One key witness at the trial was Jamison Kennedy, who both asserted that Holly had confessed to them that she had mixed something into Matthew's drinks. Kennedy was brought to the courtroom from prison, where he was serving a 10-year sentence for assaulting police officers. He repeated his claim that Holly had confessed to him about her involvement in Matthew's death, but Holly denied making such a statement. Despite Kennedy's questionable credibility, the court transcript shows that Sergeant Michael Quinn testified that when Kennedy initially told the authorities about Holly's confession, there was no public knowledge that Matthew had died from ethylene glycol poisoning. This suggests that Kennedy's information did not come from elsewhere, contradicting Holly's claim. Holly claimed that Kennedy had given her a choice: either receive leniency in her criminal case or exact revenge on her. After deliberating for 3 days, the jury delivered a verdict on August 28, 2013, finding Holly guilty on all counts. The court subsequently sentenced her to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. This case relied solely on circumstantial evidence and witness testimonies. In your opinion, was Holly truly guilty? Is it plausible that Matthew intentionally consumed antifreeze for 3 months in an attempt to harm himself? The state of Delaware was left reeling by these events. Madison Sparrow headed out to meet her friends for ice cream on October 2, 2020, but she never returned home. Her mother immediately alerted the police. Thanks to the swift actions of the officers, disturbing details began to emerge. Madison Elizabeth Sparrow was born on September 12, 2003, in Norfolk, Virginia, USA. She was the daughter of Heather Sparrow Murphy and Richard Prestige, and had 2 sisters, Molly and Wendelin. Although not much is known about her family, we do know Wendelin was born in 1999 in Durango, Colorado, from Richard's previous relationship. Over time, they settled in Newark, Newcastle County, Delaware, the setting for this story. Madison's younger sister, Molly, was born on October 5, 2010. She quickly became Madison's best friend. With a deep affection for children, Madison was the eldest among 8 cousins who all cherished her dearly. She never missed a chance to play with them or put on enchanting performances that everyone found delightful. Her laughter was truly infectious. She had a cheerful spirit that could light up any room. Yet there were moments when Madison would become pensive and dreamy. Her father shared that even from a young age, she showed wisdom beyond her years. She observed and reflected carefully before reacting. Madison's affectionate nature extended to her hugs. They could lift anyone's spirits instantly. Both friends and family saw her as deeply loyal and always considerate about their well-being. Madison's curiosity stayed with her throughout her childhood. She loved learning and experimenting, which led her to join the Girl Scouts, a global youth organization for girls. By the fall of 2012, existing Girl Scout troops were fully occupied, so her mom stepped up as their first troop leader. Madison, at the age of 9, entered the Brownies section, tailored for girls aged 7 to 10. Over the years, Madison distinguished herself as a cookie seller and earned several badges marking her exceptional performance in various duties. Throughout almost 10 in the Girl Scouts organization, she developed strong friendships. Later, driven by a desire to work with other young people and create a positive impact, she volunteered to assist in her sister Molly's troop. Madison was warm-hearted and committed to serving God and her country. She always lent a helping hand while adhering to the principles of the Girl Scouts. Like any young girl, she delighted in having fun. Even during her teenage years, she was known as the queen of pranks and loved planning parties with friends. Whether it was movie nights or makeovers that included manicures and pedicures, she could stay up all night but often struggled to wake up before 2 p.m. the next day. Before finishing elementary school, Madison met another central figure in this story, Anuka Stalinsky. Anuka was born in Newark on July 9, 2003. The two quickly became close friends and studied for exams together. Information about Anuka is limited, but we know her parents were Robert Stalinsky and Robin Kars. As of 2004, they lived on Arona Mink Drive in Newark. Madison and Anuka moved on to middle school together after completing elementary school. There they made new friends, including Noah Sharp, a fellow Newark native born on August 23, 2001. Details about Noah's background are limited too. However, it's known his mother Nikki Sharp had two other children, David and Brianna. The trio, Madison, Anuka, and Noah, would often go out together for ice cream or take long walks through the city's green spaces. When Noah and Madison crossed paths, mutual attraction sparked between them, and within a few months, a teenage romance blossomed. Initially, they were head over heels in love. However, in early 2020, after being together for just over a year, Madison decided to end the relationship without giving any apparent reasons. They parted ways amicably and agreed to remain friends. Nonetheless, Noah was heartbroken as he still deeply loved her. During this period, Anuka became a trusted confidant for Noah. They started seeing each other more frequently and texting almost every day. Although Noah's heart was still broken, with time he began dating Anuka. Despite his new relationship with Anuka, Noah did not lose contact with Madison. On her 17th birthday on September 12, 2020, he even visited her and brought a gift. That day, Madison's mother noticed that Noah was still upset about the breakup. When Anuka learned about this meeting, she became consumed with jealousy. She couldn't accept that her beloved continued to be friends with his ex-girlfriend. Likewise, Noah's resentment turned into anger. He wanted Madison to feel the same pain he was enduring. The following week, blinded by hatred and jealousy, Anuka and Noah began planning how to end Madison's life. Through text messages, FaceTime calls, and in-person meetings, they exchanged chilling ideas about possible weapons and methods for disposing of the body once the crime was committed. The messages they sent each other indicated their intention to make Madison suffer. Anuka suggested several options, including using a knife to inflict a fatal wound to the heart. They also discussed using a shotgun or perhaps a baseball bat. However, according to official documents, they quickly dismissed the idea of using a shotgun since it would produce too much noise. Although Noah wasn't very confident initially, they eventually decided on using a blunt object during these discussions. They also performed calculations to determine how many bricks would be necessary to prevent Madison's body from floating if they decided to dispose of her in the water. When doubts arose, they mentioned that another option was to bury her since Noah could dig a hole and knew where to find shovels. In the end, they devised what they believed to be the perfect plan. Madison loved ice cream almost as much as she loved Halloween. Her cheerful spirit eagerly awaited October every year to celebrate her favorite holiday. Anuka knew Madison's taste well and took advantage of this. On Friday, October 2, 2020, she called Madison and invited her out for ice cream and to spend the day together. Madison immediately agreed because she hadn't spoken to her friend for a long time and wanted to buy a gift for Molly, whose birthday was in 3 days. On that day, Madison wore black tights, denim shorts, gray boots, and a blue sweatshirt with the inscription New Jersey. She finished her look with white ghost-shaped earrings. Normally, she didn't wear much jewelry, especially earrings, but with Halloween approaching, she decided these ghost earrings would be perfect. At 2:44 p.m., she said goodbye to Heather, saying she would see her later, and left. Although there were no actual ghosts in this story, what happened next was far scarier. It was the last time her mother saw her alive. The following hours, days, weeks, and years turned into a true nightmare for the Sparrow family. her friends, and the residents of Newark. Several hours later, Heather began receiving insulting text messages from Madison's phone number, alongside messages implying that Madison had left the country. Heather initially thought it was a joke and even replied wishing her daughter luck in her endeavors, while joking that she had forgotten her passport in the safe. However, no response came back, even when Heather called Madison's phone. Heather became increasingly concerned when there was still no answer, while she was out with Molly, taking her to scout meetings and swimming lessons. The lack of response began to seriously worry her. Heather decided to call Annika, aware that they were supposed to meet later in the day. Upon answering, Annika burst into tears, explaining that Madison had insulted her and that she dropped her off near a store. Annika then suggested contacting Noah, but he wasn't responding either. Frustrated, Heather asked Annika to continue trying to reach him. The three of them, however, no new information surfaced. Disheartened, Heather opted to return home. On her way back, she received several messages from her daughter's friends who had also received unusual SMS messages and were keen to understand what was happening. Once she arrived home and searched for any clues, Heather found nothing that indicated her daughter had run away. Even the money given to her for her birthday, her clothes, and her credit card were still in her room. These strange messages made little sense. Madison had no reason to run away, especially without taking essential items like a bag with clothes and money. At approximately 8:30 p.m., when Madison failed to come home, Heather contacted 911 and reported her daughter missing. Despite continuous efforts to connect with people, all attempts were fruitless. Upon learning of the situation, Heather's parents traveled from another city to support their daughter. She also notified Madison's father, residing in Colorado, who promptly shared information on social media appealing for assistance in locating his daughter. On the next day, Saturday, October 3, 2020, the Delaware State Police issued a golden alert for 17-year-old Madison. This alert triggers all required procedures for searching for a missing person within Delaware. Over 2 days, police search teams, family members, and numerous friends scoured the farmlands near the University of Delaware, where Madison was last seen alive. The media also spread information about the search, urging people to provide any details they might have related to Madison's whereabouts. Delaware State Police simultaneously started questioning Madison's friends, and all evidence pointed to her ex-boyfriend. According to some sources, the girl headed to a wooded area in Newark behind an elementary school, where she was also seen with Noah on the day she disappeared. Detectives detained and interrogated the young man for almost 9 hours from October 4th through 5th, presenting several conflicting scenarios and insisting he didn't know what had happened. Eventually, the barrier of silence broke, shocking everyone. The young man confessed not only to taking Madison's life, but also claimed that Annika was his accomplice. Noah informed police that Annika hated Madison because she was jealous of her relationship with him. He also elaborated on how deeply he had been hurt by his breakup with Madison. Noah recounted driving Madison to the wooded area behind the elementary school. As they walked along a trail, he hid behind bushes with an aluminum baseball bat in hand. He told officers how Madison was happy to spend time with her friend and unsuspecting of the danger ahead. Suddenly emerging from hiding, Noah struck her on the head twice with great force. He admitted that he put all his strength into the second blow and said that it was at that moment he snapped after months of uncontrollable anger towards her for breaking his heart. Unable to contain himself, he continued delivering more blows to her body. Following the assault on Madison, Noah and Annika transported her body using Anna's car to a site beneath a bridge near the intersection of I-95 and a Delaware State road, approximately 15 minutes away from the crime scene and close to a warehouse. Upon reaching this location, they tried to submerge her body in the river, but failed. Instead, they opted to conceal it in a shallow grave they dug at the same spot. Using details provided by Noah, investigators meticulously searched the designated area. There, they unearthed an aluminum baseball bat used as a weapon bearing traces of blood. The crime scene yielded clothing worn by Madison when she left home, with some articles showing evidence of scorching. Subsequently, the guided law enforcement to a wooded area near the junction of I-95 and Delaware State Road. It was here that he and his accomplice had clandestinely interred the body on Monday, October 5, 2020. Corporal Heather Piper announced the finding of the body, leaving Madison's family, friends, and the entire community in disbelief. A few days later, on Friday, October 9th, hundreds of individuals gathered at the high school football field to honor and remember the victim. The autopsy revealed that Madison's death resulted from blunt force trauma to the head. Experts also found Noah's and Anna's DNA in physical evidence collected both at the crime scene and where the body was discovered. Noah faced charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a crime, and first-degree conspiracy. He was placed in a correctional facility with bail set at $1 million. On Monday, November 16, 2020, over a month after the tragic event and following the processing of necessary evidence, 17-year-old Anna was also arrested. Her arrest occurred after a grand jury in Newcastle County indicted her on charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. Meanwhile, Madison's family was in disarray. Heather repeatedly stated that a rational reason for why her daughter's life was taken would never be found. Her main plea for justice was that these criminals would never again be able to harm others or themselves. Although Noah admitted to detectives that he committed the crime during an official court indictment, he did not plead guilty. This led to speculation that his defense might argue mental instability, a common tactic lawyers sometimes use to justify their clients' actions. This case appeared to be no exception. During a preliminary hearing, Noah's attorney stated that at the time of the murder, Noah was undergoing treatment for potential schizophrenia under the care of a psychiatrist. The lawyer also mentioned that Noah had sustained an injury in Chester County, Pennsylvania, approximately 3 weeks prior to the crime. She elaborated that due to this head injury, her client experienced gaps in memory and other issues. However, she did not specify the cause or severity of the injury. In May 2021, Anuka pleaded guilty to charges of first-degree murder and first-degree conspiracy. Her lawyers negotiated a deal with prosecutors, wherein she agreed to testify against Noah regarding his intent to end Madison's life. According to court documents, several individuals, including those close to the victim, informed the police about Noah's alleged alter ego, a second personality. Prosecutors contended that Noah had spread this information as part of a premeditated plan to murder Madison and later used this narrative in court. After 2 years of awaiting justice, the trial began on October 20, 2022, in Newcastle County. During the proceedings, approximately 30 witnesses were called by Deputy Attorneys General Matt Foley and JNDS. The courtroom displayed hours of video recordings of Noah's interrogations with state police detectives. The audience listened to Noah's altering narratives until he ultimately confessed. The defense challenged this evidence by emphasizing that their client was interrogated for too long. Attorney Monica Jerome noted that detectives manipulated the interrogation process. Noah received guidance on what to say and was subjected to pressure, but it was clear to everyone that this was simply a desperate attempt to justify the actions of the accused by any available means. The prosecution also presented text messages exchanged between Noah and Annika, detailing their plan for the crime. Faced with this evidence, the defense tried to convince the court that someone else had control over Noah's device and that he wasn't the one messaging Annika. Noah's mother and brother were called to testify sequentially, giving conflicting accounts several times. Nikki stated that her son was not wet when he returned home on the evening of October 2nd, while David claimed his brother was wet and looked like he'd been in a swamp. Nikki mentioned that shortly after Noah's arrival, Anuka entered the house calmly. In contrast, David said she entered angrily, slamming the door. Prosecutor Matt Frawley asked Nikki if she had discussed the evidence against Noah with him. She replied no. However, prosecutors played an audio recording of a phone call between Noah and his mother from a month before the trial, where they discussed surveillance footage from an elementary school. In the conversation, Noah mentioned his face wasn't visible in the video, where he and Anuka were seen near the elementary school about an hour before Madison's murder. Nikki reacted with relief. The video showed an African American of similar height and build as Noah carrying a baseball bat and walking into woods with a girl. The defense questioned relatives about head injuries Noah allegedly suffered on September 13, 2020, and another unconfirmed injury from a bicycle fall just hours before police interrogations on October 4th. Noah's lawyers suggested these injuries might have caused dissociative amnesia in their attempt to justify his statements. Faced with the claim he made to the police, the prosecutors questioned whether the injury was part of a conspiracy to murder Madison. The defense contested this point somewhat uncertainly. Annika confirmed all the prosecution's arguments during her 3-hour testimony in court. In her account, she calmly explained how Noah convinced her that Madison was speaking ill of her behind her back. Friends and relatives of the victim, however, emphasized that Madison never spoke negatively about her friends. After 8 days of court sessions and presenting over 250 pieces of evidence, the jury took only 3 hours to reach a final verdict. Noah Sharp was found guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder, and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When the jury's decision was announced, Noah and his mother showed no emotion. Noah simply turned and smiled at his mother. The Madison family cried in relief. Before leaving the courtroom, Heather Madison's mother uttered a phrase her daughter had used before: "Choose light, not darkness. Love conquers all." She also expressed gratitude, saying, "We want to thank our friends and family. This has been a 2-year process, and we couldn't have done this without their love and constant support." She continued by thanking the community and specifically Newark Charter School and its administration and families. Additionally, she appreciated those who supported the Love Wins 5K over the past 2 years and backed the Madison Sparrow Memorial Scholarship aimed at aiding future educators. Regarding Annika, when Noah's guilty verdict was announced, prosecutors stated that according to Delaware state law, she would be recommended a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years, as she was a minor at the time of the crime. This is Michelle Hadley. She was born on December 20th, 1986 in Upland, California. Michelle was the eldest daughter of her parents, who were business owners. She grew up with a sister who's 3 years younger than her. Michelle was raised in a strict conservative home and shared a close relationship with her parents. Growing up, she had a pretty normal life. During her time at school and college, her friends knew her as a polite and kind person. Michelle was also known for being very outspoken and straightforward with what she had to say. However, she would always find ways to clear the air if there were any disagreements. Being a diligent girl since she was little, she always made sure to complete every task that was given to her. Throughout her high school days, she was in a relationship with just one person. Though we don't have information about his name or background, we do know that the two were together for a long time. In 2008, the two decided to get married. However, Michelle didn't realize that marriage would not bring her the happiness she sought. 4 years into their marriage, things started to fall apart. Things didn't feel like they did back when they started dating, and they decided to split up. This devastated Michelle. She believed that love just wasn't in the cards for her until 2013, when she met another man, Ian Diaz. Though we don't have much information about his past, we do know that he's 9 years older than the show. The two reportedly met through a dating site. Things with Ian felt like they were meant to be, at least from the show. Ian was working as a deputy U.S. Marshal, while on the show was working at a marketing firm. Ian seemed attentive to her needs and very loving. These characteristics drew Michelle in, and not long after, by the fall of 2014, they moved in together. Ian then proposed to Michelle, and they set a date for their wedding. Michelle and Ian seemed to hit it off very well during the start of their marriage. However, as sweet as the relationship looked from the outside, Ian slowly turned into something Michelle never foresaw. Michelle always saw Ian as an attentive and sweet-natured man. But as time passed, he soon became a self-loathing and abusive person. This took Michelle aback, since she had a hard time realizing these changes at first. She often noticed his changes in behavior, but considered them more of an act of love. There were times when he'd ask her to wear more revealing clothes. However, Michelle, being from a conservative family, found this request very uncomfortable. Nevertheless, she complied with Ian's requests. When Ian saw that Michelle could be easily persuaded, he started making more provocative requests. Soon, he asked her to get her belly button pierced. At first she hesitated, but later agreed. By this time, Ian was pushing the boundaries. His requests started to get even more bizarre. Ian had asked Michelle to leave the job at a marketing firm that she loved and take up a job at his favorite place, Disneyland. Disneyland was not only the place that he loved, but it had also been the place where he worked before he got his job as a deputy U.S. Marshal. It seemed as though Ian wanted to keep an eye on Michelle, so working at a place where he still had contacts was a good deal for him. When he presented the idea to her, he said that he wanted her to be in safer hands, but that only meant that he could watch over her every move. At first, Michelle found this request a little odd, but because she loved him and wanted to appease her husband, she obliged. By the time the request started to make Michelle feel troubled, it was too late. She saw herself becoming someone she wasn't, so she thought of talking it over with her husband. But instead of hearing her out, he lashed out and turned abusive. During this time of turmoil, Michelle and Ian decided to purchase a condo together. They naively thought that having a place that belonged to them would help make their relationship better. This was about 2 years after they met. In 2015, Michelle and Ian started searching for a condo to buy and finally found one that was located in downtown Anaheim. This condo was priced at $470,000. Though it was a little beyond their means, they mortgaged it. But at that time, Michelle was unaware that Ian had no plans to pay even a single dime toward the mortgage. When it was time to put the pony up, he made up an excuse, saying he was having a hard time with finances, but he promised to pay for the next month. Michelle then decided to go ahead with the down payment, which was about $144,000 in cash. After sorting through all the paperwork, things seemed to be sorted. In hindsight, their relationship had already reached a dead end. So, with the purchase of the condo, things started to get worse. While both of their names were on the deed, it was evident that Ian wanted the condo for himself. Michelle wasn't having it though, since she was the only one paying the mortgage. At one point, when the two of them were together in the car, they got into a fight that turned violent. Ian raised his hand to Michelle, causing her to sustain slight injuries. After this, Michelle wrote an email to her sister telling her everything that was happening. Sadly, however, she never sent it. By the end of the summer of 2015, almost 2 months after purchasing the condo, Michelle decided to leave the condo to stay with her parents. However, even though she'd left Ian with the condo, she was still paying the mortgage. In fact, Ian continued to skip the mortgage payments, and this infuriated Michelle. At this time, she'd left her high-paying job and was still working at Disneyland, which she hated. She was also earning less than what she was used to. Instead of giving in to her anger, she politely asked Ian about the condo mortgage payments. However, instead of replying, he simply ignored her emails, calls, and texts. This pushed Michelle over the line. She decided to confront him directly. Ian then stated that he never intended on paying the mortgage. Michelle was furious about this. Looking at the situation she was in, she didn't know what to do. She sent Ian a rather strongly worded email saying that things wouldn't look good for him if he continued with the behavior. This email made Ian furious, and he filed a restraining order against Michelle. However, he never got full support from the police since he was also at fault. Michelle found out about Ian's restraining order request and quickly countered it with the fact that he never paid the mortgage on the condo since they bought it together, and it was in their name. Eventually, the two of them agreed to hire property lawyers and settled the issue for good. When the judgment was made, the judge sided with Michelle. Ian was ordered to pay the rest of the mortgage, and if he failed to do so, he'd have to pay an additional penalty. The judgment obviously upset Ian, but he had no choice but to follow the court order. It took a whole year for this mess to get sorted out. By 2016, the two had separated for good. Michelle was now finally free of this toxic relationship. While Michelle was turning over a new page in her life, Ian was still quite bitter. He was still living in the condo and paying the mortgage. The whole condo situation took a toll on Ian. In an effort to pick up the pieces of his life, he started using dating apps once again. This was how Ian met the woman he thought was his perfect match, Angela Connell. Though we don't have much information about her, we do know that she was born in 1985 and is from Phoenix, Arizona. Angela attended a Catholic high school and then graduated from Arizona State University in 2006. When Ian met Angela in January 2016, they both felt an instant spark. Within a month, Ian proposed, and soon Angela moved into Ian's condo. It seemed as if Angela and Ian were destined to be together. By May 2016, Angela announced that she was pregnant, with twins. Ian was overjoyed to hear the news. Everything seemed to be falling into place for the soon-to-be parents, until an anonymous email started creating havoc. Angela received a threatening email that said, "You're not the right person for Ian." This message took Angela aback, and she considered that it might have been from her ex. Before Angela married Ian, she briefly dated a man named Jason Rayburn. However, their relationship did not end well. Naturally, she thought of him as soon as she received this anonymous message. But there was one thing that didn't seem right. When Angela broke it off with Jason, she made sure to cut off all contact with him. So it was impossible for him to know about her new relationship. It just wasn't adding up. Meanwhile, Ian and Angela continued to stay at the condo that was bought by Michelle. One day, Ian brought up the topic of the condo while he was talking to Angela, and then she finally realized that it might have been Michelle who sent that anonymous email. Soon, Angela began receiving more emails from 6 different accounts. All of them had the same message, but with different wording. Curious to find out who the sender of these emails might be, she replied to one of them and asked the identity of the sender. To her shock, she received a reply claiming the sender was Michelle Hadley. Angela told her to stop contacting her, but the emails didn't stop. The next few emails that she started to get made her feel threatened and worried for her life. After reading them, Angela didn't want to take a chance, but rushed to file a restraining order against Michelle. This happened on June 1st, 2016. In her statement, Angela mentioned that the emails she'd received from Michelle made her strongly feel fear and anxiety. She told the police officers that she was scared of leaving her home because of the threats that were in those emails that Michelle had sent. She also added that she was fearful of being attacked and killed if she stepped out of her home. After seeing the gravity of the situation, the Quicken immediately granted the restraining order against Michelle. It was during the month of June 2016, and Michelle seemed to have moved on from the toxicity of her previous relationship. Sometime during the month, she went out to meet a friend and was coming back home after, but when she only entered her driveway, she was met by a team of police officers. Michelle was dumbfounded, but without a struggle, she obliged with a restraining charge and was then taken in for questioning. During the interrogation, Michelle was asked if she knew Angela and also about the series of her email threats. To this, she replied that she had in fact never heard of Angela and was clueless about the emails that were continuously being mentioned by the officers. She even told the police officers that she was being set up because she'd received a Google alert a week before that her email address had been shut down. On the same day, she received an alert from Microsoft saying that her primary email is being used as the recovery email for a bunch of other email addresses that she'd never created. That troubled her, but she made it a point to contact the Anaheim Police Department to report the matter. She believed that it was her ex-husband who may have been trying to impersonate her, but despite her efforts, no one listened to her. On the other hand, the police officers thought that Michelle was just lying. They didn't take her words into consideration. So now, Michelle was served with a restraining order. But what Michelle did not know was that this was just the beginning. This is where things started to get even crazier. With Michelle charged with a restraining order, you might think that the situation had been settled, but it wasn't. Not long after, Angela started receiving emails in response to a Craigslist ad that she'd never posted. These ads had details soliciting a sexual coercion fantasy. Shocked by this, Angela knew that someone must have opened an account in her name. But the strange thing was, whoever it was, they had her exact details. These details included her phone number, full address of the condo, and even the breed of the dog she had. But no one else would know the entire address of the condo apart from Ian and Michelle. She thought that it couldn't have been Ian. Upon pondering this idea, Angela once again started to feel scared to death. She didn't even want to go out of her house because whoever it was knew where she lived. She felt like she was being continuously watched, and not knowing who could have done it made her feel uneasy. Days after the Craigslist ad, on the 24th of June 2016, Angela called the police. However, it was not because of the ad. This time, she was attacked. Her neck was bruised and the clothes she was wearing had been ripped. Her head had also been slammed against the wall. But still, Angela found the strength to call 911. The police then asked Angela if she recognized the person who assaulted her, and that was when Angela replied, it was Michelle. This time, the police made sure to arrest Michelle. They thought a restraining order wasn't enough to keep her from harming Angela. Michelle was arrested. While in jail, she managed to relay the message about her arrest to her parents. And since being from a conservative family, they did everything they could to handle the matter. Michelle's bail was set at $10,000. And since her parents were successful business owners, they managed to quickly bail her out. Once she was out, Angela started receiving harassing emails again. It couldn't have been Michelle, right? Well, the interesting part was, the emails that were sent to Angela actually did come from Michelle's personal email address. Not long after the tragic assault on Angela, on July 13th, she contacted 911 again. This time it was because she saw a man standing outside her condo. When the police arrived and talked to the unknown stranger, the person said he was actually responding to the same sexually explicit Craigslist ad in the name of Angela Diaz. Curious to know who might have posted the ad, the police searched for the origin of the account. It led straight to Michelle once again. Could Michelle have actually lied about all of this to the police, or was it someone else who was using Michelle's name? The next day, on the 14th of July, police arrested Michelle once again, and this time, they set her bail at $1 million. Her parents couldn't afford to pay such a large amount. Michelle vehemently denied sending me emails or creating the Craigslist ads. Her parents believed Michelle because they knew she wasn't the type to send threats to anyone. Michelle's parents then decided to hire a lawyer because they thought that whomever was playing this game could keep getting their daughter arrested. While Michelle was jailed for the second time, the threats and emails aimed at Angela again ceased. 3 months passed and everything seemed peaceful for Angela. Meanwhile, Michelle's parents were trying their best to find out who the anonymous person was posing as Michelle. To get to the bottom of it, they needed to know who had access to her records. They pulled data, school records, hospital records, and more to find if there were any loopholes. This was where they found crucial evidence. Michelle was hospitalized in June, and the first emails were sent on the same day of her hospitalization. Michelle couldn't have sent those emails herself. This piece of information gave hope to Michelle's parents. Michelle's father also downloaded a ton of software to track the IP addresses of the emails that were being sent, since they were encrypted addresses. Then one day, Michelle's parents received a surprising phone call that said Michelle was getting bailed. Who would bail Michelle out for $1 million? It turned out that the person who bailed out Michelle was none other than Ian. On the 30th of September 2016, Ian went to the police officers and presented a $1 million bail for Michelle's release. Michelle and her family were in disbelief. As to how Ian obtained this amount of cash, that has not been explained. Why would he bail her out? Did he suddenly have regrets for treating her badly? Or was there something more to the story? After Michelle was bailed out, obviously Michelle and her family wanted the answers to these questions. Surprisingly, Ian then revealed the truth. Ian claimed that Angela had supposedly framed Michelle for sending those threatening emails. She had been sending threatening emails to herself via proxy email addresses that she made using Michelle's name. Angela even went further by posting Craigslist ads, which were believed to have been made by Michelle. In those ads, the details she entered could only have been known by Ian and herself. Additionally, on the 24th of June 2016, when she was found in her garage all bruised up, it was actually Angela who inflicted the injuries on herself, and Ian had found the CCTV footage to prove it. Ian revealed that this wasn't the only thing Angela had lied about. She had, in fact, a history of making things up. Ian found out that Angela had been lying since the first day they met. She'd even lied about her pregnancy. Ian found evidence that Angela had allegedly bought a sonogram of twins off of Etsy for $7.50. She even bought a positive pregnancy test kit to back up her lie. But why would Angela want to ruin Michelle's life? Well, it all started back in 2015 when Ian and Angela met. During that time, Ian would often talk about Michelle and the condo incident. This was when Angela got curious about Michelle and started digging up her past. While doing so, Angela found that Michelle actually came from a good and wealthy background. This piece of information made Angela think of Michelle as a jackpot. Ian, on the other hand, who was married to Michelle, wanted his revenge for the whole condo situation. You see, the condo incident left a scar on Ian. He was furious about having to pay for the mortgage after Michelle's countersuit. So, the two of them then hatched a plan to bring Michelle down. Ian provided Angela with Michelle's email address, and the two of them plotted to frame Michelle and get her arrested. To conceal their evil plan, Angela and Ian created different email addresses to talk to each other. They then made 6 different accounts using VPNs in Michelle's name. Remember when Michelle spoke to the police officers about Google alerts regarding the email addresses she never created? Well, it was Angela all along. When Michelle got a restraining order, Angela wasn't happy because she wanted Michelle gone for good. That was when she devised a plan to take this to a whole new level. She created a fake profile on Craigslist and used Michelle's identity to make her first ad, in which she invited men over to her own house for a sexual coercion fantasy. However, the inconsistencies in the scenario that the two planned out made Ian confess all about his wife, thus framing her in the process. He was apparently unaware of how far she would take things. Now that everything was out in the open, the police obtained a search warrant for all of Angela's devices. Shockingly, when they went through Angela's things, they found that all of Ian's claims were, in fact, true. They found a total of 21 threatening emails, and most of them were actually sent from Angela and Ian's condo. When the police dug up the locations of the other emails that were supposedly sent to Angela, they found that some of them were also sent from Arizona. When they dove deeper, they realized during that time, Angela had actually traveled to Arizona to see her father. After these shocking discoveries, investigators began to look into Angela's background. This was when they found out that this wasn't the first time she committed such an act. Back in 2013, Angela had committed similar crimes when she was dating Jason Rayburn, a state trooper from California. During their relationship, Angela claimed that she was an attorney and had been diagnosed with cervical cancer. However, as time passed, things didn't seem to add up with regards to Angela's diagnosis and her work. This made Jason suspicious, and he started digging deeper. Shockingly, he soon discovered that Angela had faked both her cancer and her career. Obviously, this ended things with Jason. On January 6, 2019, nearly 3 years after the truth was made public, Angela was detained for her crimes. The Orange County District Attorney's Office made sure to clear Michelle's name, and 3 days later, Michelle's record of causing a threat to life and assault was finally cleared. Michelle has slowly started to get back on her feet. She finally earned her MBA and landed a good job in field marketing for a cosmetics company. Michelle then moved to New York to live with her sister, and things had never been better. Ian, on the other hand, separated from Angela and later sold the condo for $500,000. But in 2021, Ian was charged with a number of offenses for allegedly planning and carrying out the crazy plot to frame Michelle. In addition to receiving a 5-year prison sentence, he was charged with 1 count each of perjury, cyberstalking, and conspiracy to commit cyberstalking. If only the investigators and police officers had looked into the whole situation a little more closely, maybe this wouldn't have gotten as far as it did. What do you think about this case? What could have possibly been going through Angela and Ian's minds when they hatched this plan? Shafilea Ahmed was born on July 14, 1986, a British Pakistani girl. Shafilea's father, Iftikhar Ahmed, originally hailed from the Gujarat district of Pakistan. At the age of about 20 to 22, Iftikhar moved to Britain for employment. While staying there for a while and during work, Iftikhar falls in love with a foreign girl and marries her. Soon he becomes a father, but when he returns to Pakistan and informs his family about his marriage, they do not accept it. Then Iftikhar's family puts heavy pressure on him to marry another Pakistani girl. Despite Iftikhar's resistance, he eventually succumbs to his family's insistence and he marries a Pakistani girl named Farzana. After the marriage, Iftikhar returns to Britain and, after revealing the truth to his first wife, divorces her. Then, after some time, Iftikhar calls his second wife, Farzana, to Britain from Pakistan. After coming to Britain, Iftikhar starts living with his wife in the city of Bradford in West Yorkshire. It is here that on July 14, 1986, Shafilea Ahmed is born. Shortly after Shafilea's birth, the family moves to the town of Warrington in Britain. It is here that Shafilea completes her early education. During this time, 2 more daughters are born in the family, and Iftikhar's family grows larger. Although this family resides in Britain, on holidays, Iftikhar used to take his wife and all his children to Pakistan for vacation. Now the year had come, 2003, and by now Shafilea Ahmed had also turned 17 and was studying law. Her dream was to become a lawyer. When Shafilea and the other children have a break on February 18, 2003, Shafilea comes to Pakistan with her family for vacation. During their trip to Pakistan, this family also participates in a family wedding ceremony. However, just a few days after this wedding, a major incident occurs with Shafilea. She accidentally drinks phenyl floor cleaner. Actually, phenyl is commonly used in Asia for cleaning floors in homes. Now, because phenyl is made by mixing some chemicals and soap, drinking it causes severe pain in Shafilea's throat. The reason behind Shafilea drinking phenyl is initially said to be because her parents pressured her into arranged marriage with a Pakistani boy. Because of this pressure, Shafilea drank the phenyl intending to end her life. But later, her parents claimed that someone had poured phenyl into an old bottle of water, kept in the same bottle usually used for drinking water, and in the darkness of the night, Shafilea mistook phenyl for water and drank it. Due to this mistake, Shafilea had to endure a lot of pain. As a result, she's admitted to a hospital in Pakistan. Now, because Shafilea's injury was quite severe, she has to stay in the hospital for a long time. During this time, the holidays of other family members also end, so Iftikhar takes his 2 children and wife back to Britain, while Shafilea has to stay in Pakistan for treatment. However, shortly after, Iftikhar arranges for Shafilea's return as well, and on May 27, 2003, Shafilea returns to Britain. Straight from the airport, Shafilea is admitted to a hospital for treatment through an ambulance. After several months of treatment, Shafilea's throat heals considerably, and now she rejoins college. Alongside college, she also starts a part-time job. But on September 18, 2003, a college teacher notices that Shafilea Ahmed hasn't been coming to college for the past week. Attempts are made to contact Shafilea via phone, but she cannot be reached. When teacher asked about this to Shafilea's parents, they revealed that Shafilea has not been home for the past week. Their daughter has been missing for a week, and her parents hadn't filed any complaints about her yet, which strikes Shafilea's teacher as very strange. Immediately after this, they inform the police. Upon filing the case, a police team arrives at Shafilea's house for investigation, and questioning begins with her parents. Shafilea's parents say that they last saw Shafilea at their home on September 11, 2003, and since then, she hasn't been seen. Upon this, the police ask, "When your daughter has been missing for a week, why haven't you filed a complaint with the police yet?" To this, Shafilea's parents respond, "This is not the first time Shafilea has been missing from home for a few days. It has happened several times before." To confirm this, when the police check the records, it is revealed that Shafilea has been missing from home several times in the past. The first time was when Shafilea was only 12 years old. She went missing with her younger sister on March 10, 1998. Because of this, her parents had also filed a missing report for both their daughters with the police. However, at that time, Shafilea returned home with her sister as evening approached. According to records, Shafilea ran away from home for the second time on November 25, 2002. Once again, her father, Iftikhar Ahmad, filed a missing report for his daughter. After extensive searching, Shafilea was found by the police sitting in a park. According to police records, for the third time, Shafilea left home with a friend on February 3, 2003. This time, Shafilea did not return home for 2 days, and then on February 5, 2003, she went to a safe house for orphaned people and filed a report against her parents for domestic violence and mental abuse. After the report was filed, the police officer spoke with Shafilea Ahmed and her parents, and after everything was cleared up, Shafilea returned home. After this, on February 18, 2003, Shafilea, along with her 2 sisters and parents, goes to Pakistan for a family function and disappears from there shortly after returning to Britain. Now, looking at old records, the police also suspect that Shafilea Ahmed may have gone somewhere again this time and will return home in a few days. Therefore, the police try to find Shafilea in all those places where she could have gone. However, even after a few days, the police cannot find any trace of Shafilea from anywhere. Considering Shafilea's history of running away from home before, the police show a little laziness in the investigation this time. After this, some local media start making an issue out of the police's laziness. As a result, demand for a thorough search for Shafilea increases at the local level. Due to the progress in the Shafilea missing case, the police accelerate their investigation. Subsequently, they discover numerous poems written by Shafia at her home, and there was still no evidence in the case of Shafilea Ahmed. The police were engaged in efforts to locate Shafilea. Meanwhile, floods occurred in the famous Kent River, flowing from the Sedgwick area of Britain. When the floods were under control, the body of a girl were found in extremely poor condition on the banks of this river. The distance between the place where the body was found and where Shafilea Ahmed had disappeared was 70 miles. But still, the police have doubts whether this corpse could be Shafilea's. However, to confirm this, DNA samples are collected from the dead body and then matched with the DNA of Iftikhar and Fazan. In this case, a major twist occurs when a body washed away in the flood matches with the DNA samples of Iftikhar. This meant that the body washed away from the river was not someone else's but Shafilea Ahmed's, meaning in the search for Shafilea Ahmed, whom the police had been looking for the past year, now reaches the police itself in the form of a corpse. Now, the biggest question in front of the police was who and why murdered Shafilea Ahmed. However, even before the statements and actions of corpse's parents, there were doubts, and in 2003, these two, along with 5 others, were arrested. Therefore, once again, Shafilea's parents are arrested and questioned. The trial of this case is also going on, but even this time, no allegations can be proven against them, which leads the police to release them again. However, after that, the police detain some other suspects and proceed with the investigation against all of them. But despite many efforts, the police cannot reach the murderer. As time passes, people slowly start to forget about Shafilea Ahmed's case. Shafilea disappeared in 2003, and now it was 2010. That is, it had been 7 years since Shafilea's death. By now, Shafilea's family had also moved on from the incident and had become busy with their daily lives. But then, on August 25, 2010, a major theft occurs at Iftikhar Ahmed's house. By now, Iftikhar Ahmed's family had already become the center of attention in the city due to their daughter's disappearance. Due to this, when theft occurs in this house, it starts making headlines on the front page of newspapers. But once again, this puts heavy pressure on the police. Despite working honestly, the police quickly get involved in the search for the thief. After many days of hard work, the police make a revelation that surprises everyone. Actually, the police arrest not someone else, but Iftikhar Ahmed's daughter, Alicia Ahmed, on charges of theft in the house. In fact, Alicia was Shafilea's younger sister. According to Alicia, she didn't get as much money from home as she demanded and needed. Because of this, she orchestrated the theft of her father's money at her own home. However, the police had solved the theft case very quickly. But the police spot an opportunity here and now. They start talking to Alicia about her sister Shafilea, who disappeared many years ago, and reopen the file related to the Shafilea case. In the initial conversation, the police suspect that Alicia knows something about the disappearance of Shafilea that the world is still unaware of. The police officers try to uncover what happened with Shafilea, but Alicia refuses to cooperate with them. However, the police then tell Alicia, "You have orchestrated a theft in your own house, which could lead to a long prison sentence for you. But if you can provide any information about Shafilea that nobody else knows, your sentence could be significantly reduced." Afterwards, when Alicia reveals some details to the police, everyone is left stunned. Alicia explains, "It was not someone else but my father, Iftikhar, and my mother, Farzana Ahmed, who had beaten Shafilea Ahmad in front of all of us sisters. Then our father put polythene on her face, and due to suffocation, she was dead. Then he placed Shafilea's body in his car and threw it into the distant jungle. However, due to the flood, the body drifted to the riverbank from the jungle." According to Alicia, Iftikhar and Farzara did not like their daughter's modern lifestyle at all. On the surface, Shafilea started falling in love with a boy, and when this matter comes to light, Iftikhar and Farzana quickly try to arrange Shafilea's marriage with their preferred boy. When the family goes to Pakistan for a family function, there is an attempt to forcefully marry Shafilea to a boy there, but Shafilea refuses to marry for this reason, and she consumes fennel. After that, her health deteriorates, and her marriage does not happen either. When Shafilea returns to Britain, her family members here also insist on arranging her marriage with a boy of their choice. But when Shafilea repeatedly refuses this marriage, her father gets angry, and at first beats Shafilea in anger, and then covers her face with a polythene bag, and then due to suffocation, Shafia Ahmad dies here. But immediately after this disclosure, Alicia Ahmed becomes a government witness in the case. In exchange, she is assured a minimum sentence in the theft case. However, based on Alicia's statement on September 2, 2010, Farzana and Iftikhar are arrested, and then a case of their own daughter's murder is pursued against them. Both of them remain in jail for several months after the arrest. However, nearly a year later, on September 15, 2011, they are granted bail by the Manchester Crown Court. In the further investigation, the police gather some crucial evidence, and based on that evidence, the trial of this case begins in the Chester Crown Court on May 21, 2012. Initially, Farzana and Iftikhar continue to deny their involvement in their daughter's murder, but when Farzana begins to suspect that she is being framed for her own daughter's murder, she finally accepts in court on July 9, 2012, that Shafilea Ahmed's murder was not committed by anyone else, but by Iftikhar Ahmed himself. In her statement, Farzana also reveals that she tried to stop Iftikhar, but instead, Iftikhar beat and threatened her family, saying, "If any of you ever talk about this to anyone, your fate will be just like Shafilea's." Now, 2 witnesses had testified against Iftikhar Ahmed. Besides, the police who gather evidence also indicate that it was Iftikhar Ahmed who murdered Shafilea, then threw her body far into the jungle. However, a natural disaster struck that area, and with the floodwaters, Shafilea's body drifted and reached the riverbank on its own. After a lengthy trial in August 2012, Farzana and Iftikhar are found guilty of murdering their own daughter and disposing of her body. After the murder, they are then sentenced to 25 years each. It is also proven in court that this was an honor killing. Following this verdict, every year on July 14th, Shafilea Ahmed's birthday, the National Day of Memory for Victims of Honor Killings, is observed in her memory. So with this, the case of Shafilea Ahmed comes to a close. However, perhaps nature also desired that Shafilea Ahmed receive justice and her killers be punished. Therefore, albeit late, Shafilea's parents, her murderers, are also sentenced. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Juan Carlos, Diana's father, was in Madrid but wasted no time in contacting the police to be their final farewell. On her way, she encountered her acquaintance Diana Maria Care Lopez Pinel. Investigators had to determine what happened when Diana disappeared 16 years old. The family dynamics were complicated, and letters written by Diana and Valeria to each other also appeared in the press, from which it became clear that both sisters were going through serious emotional problems. Valeria has even been hospitalized several times over the past year, once having to have parents. On November 10, 2016, the driver of the very car police immediately discovered that Jose Enrique was the same driver who had been detained in 2016 on goodbye to Diana and give her a proper burial. The body was found in the well of an abandoned warehouse. Family for broadcasting an alleged last photograph of the murder victim